description of who is here, who's around, because people can see that, although I may just do it, maybe we'll start with a quick introduction. Okay, so today is Monday, March 8th, 2021. This is the Public Affairs and Safety Committee. We're meeting at 6:30 tonight. That time change was noted. We're beginning with some outstanding agenda items, and I think what's of most interest to people is emergency response. That will be later in the agenda, so anybody tuning in during what they expect to be a typical time, they will not miss that piece. The governor of the state of Illinois has declared a gubernatorial disaster proclamation in response to the COVID-19 outbreak, restricting individuals to gatherings of 50 persons or less, and all of the city of Elmhurst is covered by this disaster area. In light of this ongoing outbreak, the mayor of the city of Elmhurst has determined that an in-person meeting for the March 8th, 2021 PA&S committee may not be practical or prudent in light of the disaster. All the aldermen of the city council participating tonight are here physically located in our council chambers. However, individuals wishing to participate remotely may do so. This proclamation was signed by Mayor Morley on March 24th, 2021. We renew those every 2 weeks if we are going to extend it. So to allow staff time to participate, the information has been posted. If you'd like to submit public comment or if you would like to dial in, that information is available on our website. And that is the beginning of board docs. Okay, so I'd like to call this meeting to order. It is 6:35 p.m. Director Olberg, can you please take the roll?
Yes, Chairman. Chairman Polumsky?
Here.
Vice Chairman Deuter?
Here.
Alderman Park?
Here. Okay, 3 present, none absent. We have a quorum. Moving on to public comments. Do we have any public comment in person or via call-in, Director Olberg?
I do have one signed up for public comment, Rami El-Sharais.
Okay, sure, is it El-Sharais? If you would like to come up and you can speak at the microphone, thank you. We ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes, but we'll give you time to finish your thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Members of the committee, my name is Rami El-Sharif. I grew up in the city and have called it home the majority of my life. Along with being an Elmhurst resident, I've been a full-time professional firefighter-paramedic for another suburban agency for the past 13 years. One of my career goals when I first entered the fire service was to become an Elmhurst firefighter and serve the community I've called home for so many years. I can now sincerely say that I am thankful that I do not work for this municipality. When a need to provide more service to the community was realized, the city chose to bring in an additional contract paramedic instead of turning over the responsibility to the firefighters that staff the engines and trucks. Truly a slap in the face to those wanting to do more. We have highly trained, highly skilled individuals that are not able to fully serve the community they swore an oath to protect because of the soured labor management relations between city officials and the members of Local 3541. In your proposed 2021 operating budget, an increase for ambulance service states the increase will, quote, allow Metro Paramedic to attract, recruit, and retain high-quality paramedic personnel by providing an increased base wage and equity adjustments to current employees assigned to Elmhurst, end quote. Unfortunately, recruiting and retaining high-quality individuals is not a strong suit for contractual ambulance services. High-quality individuals are full-time sworn employees of the city or protection district. I'm calling on this council and the rest of the City Hall officials to have a 3-step program to end contractual services with Metro and Superior. The first being for City Manager Grabowski to sign the side letter of agreement that's on his desk, turning all fire apparatus into ALS-equipped vehicles and outfit all frontline apparatus with ALS equipment. Second, to hire 4 full-time firefighter paramedics, the staffing has been lost to retirements. The fire department already operates at a dangerously low staffing for the call volume it faces on a yearly basis, and I feel that lives are at risk due to the city's lack of replacing individuals. Third, using the Silver Spanner program to completely eliminate Metro Paramedic services in the city of Elmhurst. By slowly eliminating Metro Paramedics, the fire department immediately gains 4 more firefighters on the fire ground, enhancing the goals of its effective response force needed to safely complete all fireground tasks. The city prides itself on being one of the most desirable, sought-after cities to live in the western suburbs, and its residents deserve the best when it comes to public safety. Let me be clear. Public safety should not be a for-profit service, and that's exactly what private ambulance companies are, a for-profit service by placing a body in a role. a role they did not earn, a role where they could not pass a written exam, a physical agility, or as stringent of a background check. These are not the type of individuals I want showing up to my house for a medical emergency. Often overworked with no vested interest in the city and a common revolving door, contract paramedics do not fulfill the needs that the residents of this town deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other public comments?
None signed up. I know there are some folks from the public on the line and here in person.
Okay. Anybody in the council chambers, if you would like to make a public comment? Anybody? No? Okay. All right, so moving on to anyone who has called in, if you'd like to make a public comment, please let us know. No. Okay. Thank you. Moving on to receipt of written communication from the public. Do we have any? We do have 2 written communications sent in. Typically, this is used for when somebody wants to submit written information to the council or the committee. And for example, we have one from Armeline Moretti, and looks like this is about 16 pages long. There's some information there about speeds at 20 miles per hour and the benefit of that, and it's got some information from MUTCD. I think maybe we'll touch on that when we reach our traffic review agenda items. And the next one is from Jeff Gable. This was submitted through the Elmhurst Postmaster email address. It is urging the city to examine the issue of ALS equipped fire apparatus. And it encourages this and saying that there could be partnerships with the hospital and firefighters union that would not increase costs. So we have received that. It is posted on our website. Are there any other written communications? Anybody in the audience? Would you like to submit something? Nope. Okay, thank you. Moving on to business before the committee. Agenda item A, minutes of the February 22nd, 2021 meeting of the Public Affairs and Safety Committee. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes? Motion, Alderman Deuter, second, Alderman Park. Do we have any comments or questions? No. None. Okay. In case somebody is calling in still, Director Olberg, I'd like to ask that you do a roll call vote, please.
All right. Alderman Park.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Deuter.
Aye.
Chairman Plumsky.
Aye. All in favor, none opposed, motion passes unanimously. Moving on to agenda item B, request to declare surplus miscellaneous fire department items. So just as we seek and request approval for purchases, there are certain items and circumstances that require us to review and approve when we're unloading something. So Chief or Deputy Chief, so Chief Freeman or Deputy Chief Anashabitz, if you'd like to, could you please set this up for us?
Thank you, Chairman Plumsky. The recent cleanup around Fire Station 1 and 2 showed that we had some additional surplus items that we were looking to dispose of that are no longer of any value and that were just kept on the shelf over years that we've never gotten rid of. The equipment cannot be traded in for any value and has no use to the fire department anymore. So the list composed here is what we'd like to declare as surplus and dispose of.
Okay. Any comments or questions? No. Can we have a motion to approve the report, please? Motion, Alderman Park, second, Alderman Deuter. Any other comments or questions? Nope. No. Okay. Director Olberg, can you call the roll, please?
Alderman Park.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Deuter.
Aye.
Chairman Plumsky.
Aye. All in favor, none opposed, motion passes unanimously. Can we please put this on the consent agenda for the next council meeting? Thank you. Moving on, agenda item C, Fire Department foreign fire insurance treadmill purchase. Okay, so Deputy Chief, this will be you too. Oh wait, I don't see it showing up here. Is yours showing up
Yes,
as
it
the
did.
document? Okay, all right, I don't
Yeah,
have it,
for
I know
2
what it
treadmills.
is.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So this is the fund that really is our code governs, and it's really state statute that governs when things need to be approved. It's a fund that is generated really through the state or Illinois Municipal League, and then these purchases go through our council when they're above, I believe it's $5,000. We approve it. Okay. All right. Can you walk us through this, please?
Chair Polonsky, thank you again. The foreign fire tax and the fire department is looking to purchase 2 Woodway treadmills for the total cost of $17,556 for both of them. They will be replacing 2 treadmills that no longer operate and cannot be fixed. This is a single source provider. Due to the manufacturer and distributor of the treadmill and the construction grade, it is no other treadmill on the market like this Woodway treadmill. So the foreign fire tax is looking to surplus out the 2 treadmills that are no longer being used and purchase the 2 new treadmills.
Comments or questions?
It'll
Yeah.
be 1 for each station.
Okay. Alderman
Oh,
Farr.
that was what I was just gonna ask, is like, okay, so 1 for each station. Do the people like reserve a time, or how much does it get used?
You get used a lot, and we're very fortunate to have nice workout facilities at both stations, and we do have currently a treadmill at each station. This will be a second one, and we have a exercise bike as well. So with seniority and the way that they use their workout times, there's never really a challenge to get in if you wanted to use it. So
No,
there's no
that's good.
sign-up sheet or anything like that, though.
Yeah, no, it's good for the spirit, yep.
Alderman Dwighter.
Just one question about the purchase, and then I had some questions about the Foreign Fire Insurance Fund. I think this is, since I've been on the committee, this is the first time I think that we've actually used these funds for a purchase, so I just want to understand a little bit more about the fund itself. To clarify on the treadmills, so this talks about the existing treadmills have outlived their service lives and are in need of replacement. Sounds like we're not going to replace those as much as we're adding to them, right? Are you saying they're both?
Right, there was actually
Competitive?
two that were damaged that cannot be fixed. It's with the circuit board issue that it costs a lot more than the treadmills even worth. So we're gonna surplus those out and get the additional 1 to replace. So there'll be 2 treadmills at Station 1 and 2 at Station 2.
And that's what we have now. So
That's
this
currently
is a
what we have now.
replacement
Right.
where we have 2 now, and we're getting rid of 1 at each station and using these to replace those. Got it. If it's okay if I ask a few questions about the fund, can you just talk about where the dollars come from? And then are these designated in our budget? I know we have a line in the budget about this, and just kind of what the process is for using these funds and what they can be used for.
The fund is established with 2% of the insurance monies that come in from carriers throughout Illinois. And the money is collected, the 2% of the insurance company budgets and gives to the fire service for the betterment of the fire service is what we utilize these funds for things like Mondo pad boards that are in the stations. Those were a significant purchase that we use for training, exercise equipment, tools for the apparatus, various things throughout the station, kitchen supplies, chairs, anything above, like Chair Plumsky stated, $5,000 we bring to the board for approval. Most of the stuff that we buy is far below that, and meetings are quarterly throughout the year at Station 1. Minutes are posted, the agendas are posted for the minutes. Anything else?
So
Any
these
other-
are more items that are not provided for in our existing budget. So
Correct.
this is not, these are not capital expenses, this is not salary, payroll. These are, we have little control over how much is collected and how it's distributed. So this is something that is outside of just here in Elmhurst.
Yeah, if the department wants to buy a television set and we don't budget for it, they can use the funds to purchase a television set. Or if there's a new piece of equipment that was not budgeted, such as an extrication tool or something like that, again, the foreign fire money can be used to purchase that equipment.
Okay, and we do have this line in our budget, correct?
Correct,
But,
yes.
so it does flow through our budget. This talks about the Elmhurst Foreign Fire Insurance Board met and, is recommending this purchase.
Correct.
Who are the people on the board?
We have 5 people on the board. and they're across each shift. So there's a president, vice president, treasurer, and a secretary on the department. And then there's actually a fitness committee of another 4 to 5 firefighters that look over all of our equipment, make recommendations to the board for purchase, and then at a meeting, we would sit and vote whether or not the chief has a vote to overall accept or decline the position or the purchase altogether. So even though the board votes on something, if it's not up to what we feel should be in the fire stations, we can deny the purchase.
Okay.
So there is several layers to it, I guess.
And is the board comprised of firefighters?
Yes, it's all active firefighters are on the board.
I'd
Okay.
like to say that that is defined by statute. So our code mirrors what the state has already established. So that is something that, the specific people are appointed, but the composition of that board is something that we really don't weigh in on. But something like this fitness committee is something that our own staff will have established, or any other opportunity to weigh in on purchases.
Correct.
And do you know off the top of your head what the amount of dollars spent from the fund on a
Yes,
typical
there's
year?
an updated budget. Off the top of my head, I don't know.
Yeah.
I would say that right now, there's 180,000 in there, maybe, in that ballpark range. We get the checks deposited in the account, so it's somewhere in that ballpark.
Okay. And so out of the 180,000 each year, this is a purchase for under 18,000, so it's just a small portion of
Correct.
what's received. Got it.
There
Thank
is a
you.
budget for annual subscriptions, to the newspaper and magazines, fire training courses that they go to on an annual basis. We have a records management system for all our training. The foreign fire tax pays for that, so
Okay.
there are some annual subscriptions and a budget that we follow every year.
Okay, terrific. Thank you for that
You're
extra
welcome.
information. It's helpful.
I was just gonna ask, like, what else we use this fund for, and is there a limit, or what other things have we been able to get help to fund with this?
The kitchen
When I
table.
first started, some of the money was directed towards the purchase of our rescue squad. So that was a big purchase, but that was in 1995 that it was purchased. The most recent is there was quite a bit of money donated to the First Responders Memorial for Station 2 to get the groundwork and construction started on that.
Okay.
So
But
some
that
of the
was
bigger
separate,
projects.
though, right? That's not a foreign fire insurance purchase.
Well, they took money and put it into the fund for the First
Okay.
Responder Memorial. So they did take some of the money for the memorial itself. So they are both budget line items.
Thank you. Yeah,
You're
just
welcome.
trying to piece it together.
A lot of the stuff that we're recently purchasing is all like technical rescue equipment, water rescue equipment to get the team started. They've purchased a lot of that to put on the vehicles.
Okay. All right. Okay, any other questions? Okay. All right, well, we have a motion to approve the report for Fire Department foreign fire insurance treadmill purchase. Motion Alderman Deuter, second Alderman Park. Any other comments or questions? Nope. Director Olberg, can you call the roll, please?
Yes. Alderman Park,
Aye.
Vice Chairman Deuter,
Aye.
Chairman Plumsky.
Aye. All in favor, none opposed. Motion passes unanimously. We will see this on the consent agenda at our next meeting. Great, thank
Danny, do
you.
we want to sign either of these reports?
We can do it
I can do it right now.
We could do it now, or we could do it after the meeting, like a normal council meeting. Whatever,
No, truly, whatever.
yeah.
Sure.
Maybe we can wait and we can be distanced as we sign them. Okay,
Assembly line it.
assembly line. All right, moving on to agenda item D, parking vehicle PD 334 ALPR camera proposal. We've got Chief Ruth and Deputy Chief Kozrowski. We heard a lot of detail about this, but we weren't quite ready to have the report prepared. So Chief Ruth, can you bring us up to speed?
Yes, I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Chief Mike McLean.
Mike
He's
McLean
done
is
the
here too. Okay.
lion's share of the research
Yep.
on this project.
I didn't realize we'd both deputies here. Hi. Okay.
Members of the Public Affairs and Safety Committee. As you recall, at the last meeting, we had a presentation by myself and then a member of Motorola Vigilant Solutions on their license plate reader parking solution. Just to summarize a little bit of that, the city normally employed 2 parking control officers to patrol generally the central business district as well as the other business districts in town. The central business district has a number of parking priorities, including street parking with overtime parking violations, parking garage parking, Metra-related parking, city surface lots, payment box collections, and downtown traffic control. There's a number of permits that the city has set up and regulations in order to manage the parking in the downtown area related to time limits, customer-only parking, employee permits, disabled spaces, and permit and fee spaces. To become more efficient and effective in our current patrols of the downtown area, the police department and finance and IT departments of the city are proposing to outfit parking control vehicle 34, which is the vehicle used by our current and only parking control officer, to detect parking control violations as opposed to using a manual pen paper log to log license plates and locations and times and then come back. Basically, the technology, as the parking control officer patrols the central business district, it detects vehicles that have been parked in excess of the time limits for that particular space based on the GPS location, and then alerts the officer to the violation. The technology does not have any specifically identifying information related to it. There's no driver's license information. There's no registered owner information. It just simply alerts the officer of the violation, and then the parking control officer uses our normal parking ticket issuing system to verify the violation and issue a parking ticket if that is what is determined by the officer. The parking control system not only alerts officers to the violation, but it also interfaces with technologies used by the city for permitting. So if somebody uses a metro space to go get on a metro train, they will utilize the parking kiosks to enter their license plate, and then that payment box will interface with the parking control system to let the parking control system and the officer know that the space has been paid for and therefore the vehicle is okay to be there and there wouldn't be a violation. So basically it's not just the cameras, but it's a computerized interface system with the other parking systems that the city has had in place for several years. So back in 2016, the city did an RFP for license plate reader services. The responses to the RFP were vetted, and ultimately Vigilant Solutions and Motorola were approved to be our license plate reader vendor. Vigilant has provided us the quote that you see in board docs for $27,900 to outfit PD34 with a 3-camera license plate reader system. The 3 cameras are necessary to ensure that there's enough coverage to pick up the vehicles as it patrols in different areas. Basically street parking, parallel parking, perpendicular parking, and also in the parking garages. You don't want to miss certain cars that are parked differently than others. We want the system to be complete. The quote also, in addition to the hardware, also includes connection to the current parking space systems that the city has, and integration and training system set up, and also a 5-year warranty taking us through year 5 for the hardware in case there happens to be a breakdown and requires replacement. At the last meeting, Alderman Park, you had a few questions regarding not so much the system itself, but I believe the revenues that were generated by the parking control fund. So it's important to note that this purchase was planned and budgeted for this year in the city parking control fund. There's a line item for equipment that this would be taken out of. And pull it up here. So I spoke with the finance director, Tom Trozine, and regarding parking revenues, Alderman Park, in 2019, the city brought in $1.2 million, and in 2020, which was the pandemic year, as we all know, it was $630,000 approximately in revenues. I'm happy to answer any questions you have additionally on the system. Basically, we'd be looking to implement this, if approved, by the summertime as far as adding the technology to the car, training the parking control officer on how to utilize it, and then to begin utilizing the system.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Chief. Do we have any questions or comments from the committee?
No, thank you for getting that extra data. I just was curious, but I think this technology is incredible. And it seems like it's going to be a huge time saver.
Compared to
Much
paper
more
and pen,
efficient.
absolutely.
I cannot even believe that it was still pen and paper. Like,
It also was chalk, well.
and chalk.
Questionable
Chalk was very helpful, but we
authority
can't
for
use
that,
chalk
but
anymore,
yes.
so.
Yeah, I
Chalk
think
on
it's
a
going to be
tire,
great.
yeah. Alderman Dwyer. Go ahead.
Yeah. Question, you talked about the 2 staff people that are part of the parking enforcement team now, and that we have one of those positions filled. Can you remind me, I think it's the department's intent to fill the second spot. What I'm wondering is if it might be possible, and maybe this is already part of the plan, to hold off on filling that second position until this system is in place and we have an understanding of how much efficiency it adds to that person's job. I know there's one question about just covering the number of hours that this needs to be monitored. But I do, just in the interest of trying to find cost savings, really, I think it'd be interesting to see what this person is able to cover and if there might be a way to somehow stagger hours to get the full amount of time covered with just one staff person.
Alderman,
Just wondering about
that actually will be the plan. It's our intent to get this system up and running. We currently only have one parking control officer.
Yeah.
The other one has been vacant for close to a year, basically since the pandemic began. As you know, the city has had a hiring freeze in place, so the position has not been filled. That is also a reason why this increased efficiency is seen as necessary, to have our single parking control officer be able to patrol these areas. That being said, we will definitely evaluate how much more efficient this system makes the parking control officer. We wouldn't be proposing this if we didn't think that we'd be getting some efficiencies. I certainly believe we will. Once we get that data, we will have to analyze and decide moving forward in a time period where the pandemic has ceased and we have more routine traffic volumes in the downtown area related to businesses, restaurants, movie theaters, metro parking for commuting downtown, and also the residential population that is increasing as well, to evaluate all these things and see what our manpower needs will be. At this point, clearly the system, if approved ultimately by the City Council, will be in place before any secondary hiring decision would be made, so we'll have time to evaluate it and then provide good recommendation on what our needs moving forward may be.
I would just probably add that, we would want to see more traffic flows in terms of the downtown business district that we've historically seen. And I feel confident that those are going to eventually come back. Yeah. It's just a matter of when. But we're able to get by with one parking enforcement officer right now. And as the Deputy Chief indicated, as we roll out that technology, we're going to look at it, we're going to analyze it, and then carefully watch the traffic volume and the traffic flows in the downtown business district. And then when and if the time is right, then we would speak to the city manager about the replacement of that position. But I don't want to replace it until we absolutely need to do so.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just one quick little follow-up on, with the Vigilant company that we're getting this from, if we add a second one, is it like at a reduced rate, like a sibling rate? You know what I mean? Like, we pay such and such for the first.
So we actually already are in that pattern, in that, in 2016, we implemented a license plate reader system in Elmhurst for the investigation of crime, fixed locations. So we're using the same technology, the same account for a parking system as that. We're basically adding onto our current system, but for a parking module. When you have license plate reader technology, you basically have to pay the vendor a fee every year. We're paying the reduced fee based off of the total cameras that we've bought since this began in 2016.
Yeah.
Kind of a scale of economy.
Yeah. Super. That's what I was thinking.
My other question, two things that I want to talk about that were touched on at the last discussion. And one is, one of the things that I think Chief Ruth brought up is the idea of this system helping with a culture of compliance, which is just something, I mean, may come up again in a later agenda item discussion about, just the way that we enforce, and that, hopefully with this system in place, we're staying on top of our parking restrictions more, and helps to create that culture of compliance. So I loved that concept and just wanted to kind of remind us of that phrase again. And the second thing that we talked about at the last meeting was our downtown parking review, and in an ideal world, we've looked at those parking restrictions, the current ones, and made any changes that might be on the horizon before we implement this system. If the timing works out, I think that would be helpful. So just wanted to kind of stick that in there again.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Chief. I think Alderman Deuter touched on a couple of the points that I think were important from our original discussion. But also want to, if anybody following along, I know we've got a greater audience than we typically do, so recommend if you want to take a peek at more about Vigilant or about our existing ALPR units that are used to track license plates, or to document license plates so they may be used. We are not just following people or tracking them. And how this fits into that and the process to determine this vendor. We've got all that if you look on board docs. But yes, I want to touch on also what Alderman Deuter said and the culture of compliance. And the benefit of that is also not just, because we have rules that we want to enforce, but really this is something that businesses come to the city asking for. They may say something like, somebody is parked in front of my business. I want to make sure that we can change this out. We want to see more customers, more foot traffic, instead of somebody parking there for too long of a time. So that's really where the compliance is, its benefit to everybody. I also want to talk about the fact that this will provide us more concise data. Right now, we can guess, how often or what spaces need to be 3 hours, or when do we have a 10-minute spot, or where are those placed, and how viable is a, let's say, floor of the parking garage to be 4 hours versus the street. So I think what we have realized that, first of all, we would like to continue our discussions under a different agenda item about the composition of parking and how it's designated, but also that in the future, because we have this technology, we'll be able to determine, how many 10-minute spots do we need? How many 3-hour spots do we need, and where do those need to lie? So thank you. I think this will be very helpful.
Great.
Can I have a motion, then? Any other questions? Motion to approve the report. Motion, Alderman Park. Second, Alderman Deuter. Any other last comments or questions? No. Okay. Director Olberg, can you call the roll, please?
Yes. Alderman Park.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Deuter.
Aye.
Chairman Palomski.
Aye. All in favor, none opposed, motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Deputy Chief McLean, and all of our police staff. It's very helpful, the explanation that we've had tonight, but throughout this process. All right, we'll see this on the consent agenda next meeting. And I do want to recognize, I've seen additional members of the public walk in. Because our meeting started earlier, however, not with, I think, the topic of most interest, I still would, before we reach that topic, I will be offering another opportunity for public comment if anybody wants to participate either here or calling in. So I just thought I would acknowledge that. Moving on to agenda item E, pedestrian and vehicular safety on residential streets, which is a referral. Everybody loves the traffic agenda items. So do we have, is Deputy Chief McLean going to touch on this, or are we waiting for and City Engineer Kent Johnson?
We were looking for a little more direction in
Okay.
terms of what to put on this. We did do some research in the area to find out if there were any other communities that were posting speed information at particular location. And the only one that came up was Clarendon Hills, with maybe a population of 5,000 people. They had they've got a website, and you can kind of click on it and at specific locations in their community and see what the average speed of the vehicles are. And no one else that we're aware of that we found out offers anything like that.
It's your referral.
Sure,
Alderman Dwighter. Yeah,
sure.
go ahead.
So we kind of teed this up at the last 2 weeks ago at our committee meeting. It was kind of the initial discussion, and we went through a bunch of the kind of points that are touched on in the referral. We don't need to do that again. You know, as I was thinking about the follow-ups to kind of build on the last discussion, I did have some questions and would be happy to try and add color to the discussion with the committee members. One of the things that came up, and probably the police department can answer, although it might be a Kent Johnson question, but we talked about some of the speed trailers being out of service. So one of the questions that I have for tonight is to really understand what devices we do have available and what type of data we are able to currently collect.
We currently have 2 speed trailers. They are not, they do not have the ability to capture data. It's strictly speed display. Previously, we had purchased 2 pole-mounted cameras that were temporary at temporary locations, and they were battery operated, and there were some. They're probably good for 3 to 4 days, depending on the battery power. And we were able to capture some of the data from that. But because those required Public Works to mount them on a pole at different locations, over the last year and a half or so, they were dropped. And as a result, the damage made them inoperable and not repairable. So we've held off on, you know, we hit the pandemic, so we've held off on trying to make a decision in terms of, you know, do we go and purchase 2 additional ones to replace the others? If so, what's the likelihood that they'll be dropped again? We might be back in the same boat. So we're trying to find out, you know, what else is out there, maybe looking at some of the technology to capture that data so we can take a look at it and analyze it. You know, the previous ones, the pole-mounted cameras were helpful. I know traffic engineering has some speed counters that do not offer a display. You know, and then again, there's pros and cons when you look at the display type speed measuring devices. Is that, you know, sometimes people view that as wow, I wonder how high I can make it go, or someone who's trying to skew the data in an attempt to get a stop sign or something else. We've experienced that, unfortunately, firsthand. And so we're looking at speed devices, and I think depending on what the recommendations come from this referral, we'll maybe point our trajectory in terms of what type of a device or devices do we replace the 2 damaged ones with.
Add to
Yeah,
that.
just continue.
So I think we talked at the last meeting, it came up that when you see it, it might not capture the data, it might not reflect everyday use in terms of the speeds on the street, right? It's the I forget what Kent called them, but the air tubes that, you know, you don't see them, you just run over them, and it's recording the speed data. So I think one key piece of that is being able to capture data, and then the question is, what do we do with it? And thank you for looking at other communities that do kind of capture this and make it available. I'd be interested, I'll take a look at what Clarendon Hills has available. But I think, you know, that's a key piece, is when we're, you know, this is all typically generated by a complaint, right? We hear from a resident that there is, you know, they're reporting high speeds in a certain area. You already know the hot spots, but sometimes new ones pop up. And the question is, how do we respond? What do we do when we get those complaints? And so kind of going out and trying to get a sense of what the issue is. And so that's capturing that data. And then it's, what do we do with that? How do we follow up with the residents is one piece of that, trying to standardize, again, the data that we're capturing and then how we respond with it. So it's, what do we communicate back to the residents? And then I do think we could get this information once it's captured up on our website and find a way to present it and then find a way to analyze it over time. I believe it's in Public Works tonight. They're talking about the GIS contract. It seems like if we have an opportunity to really enhance some of our GIS services, that this might be a really, to get some expertise about what's possible when you have data and how to reflect it on a map and how to analyze it over time. So I don't have all these ideas. A GIS person, I think, could take it and run with it. Staff could take it and run with it in terms of how do we standardize that response and how do we standardize the collection of data and the use of that data. Those were kind of the follow-up points that I wanted to get out there tonight.
I agree, and I also think part of what this is, like the GIS enhancements may be more automatic, yet I think there may also be the opportunity to combine this with Elmhurst Connect. So an area that perhaps has not been evaluated or maybe has something that is, come to the attention of residents where there could be an opportunity to say, could we have a speed study, or could we have something documented on our block, on our street, and there would be a way for somebody to submit that request and then to see the feedback from it. So I think there's an opportunity for both of these.
That's exactly what I was gonna say, after, like, Cassandra was saying that it was gonna be launched, like, it sounded like that was the kind of thing somebody could submit and then get feedback on, and we would have it kind of as a whole package and stuff, and that other people could learn about. I don't know if it has that capability. Like, they talked about streetlights being out. Be nice if it could transcend to this other stuff.
Right, so it would allow someone to report a concern and what that is, and I would think there's another field that we could at least, if there's something isn't automatically set up, be a, or GIS or any expansion that we're using in collecting information. So I don't know, is that helpful just to hear how, not just so much the actual equipment used to display or record it, but perhaps just a more integrated way for us to approach it, and so it's more uniform, not just, oh, are we doing a traffic study here, or did these people, mention a concern, but just generally, is there a way that not only could this help us when we're making these traffic decisions, but perhaps even it would like spill over to some of your enforcement and some of your need for allocation of staff or resources to?
Yes, and one of the variables on a traffic issue is what the particular problem is. Sometimes, in many cases, it's going to be a nice scientific analysis or a traffic study where we're going to measure speeds, try to make a determination, our vehicles, in fact, speeding at that particular location, and then, based on that, we would move towards some enforcement. Other times, we may not want to analyze it. We may want to get an officer out there right away and specifically assigned, hey, listen, we've had 2 complaints, or maybe there's some road construction that's occurring on a particular street. Vehicles are speeding down the side street as a result of it. We may not want to get on the list for a traffic study, get it set up, try to analyze it, and then determine there's a problem. That could take several weeks. Versus we need to act on this right now. We assign a squad car or a patrol car over to that particular location to number 1, be visible, and number 2, to get out there with a radar gun and stop speeding cars as they see fit. So sometimes it's going to determine on the immediacy of the particular issue. But yeah, the data is always very helpful, and we can't do both at the same time because then that's going to skew the data.
Yeah.
We're measuring the speeds of cars when there's a patrol car out there. Hopefully they're slowing down when they see the black and white, but.
Good.
Just to follow up, I appreciate that depending on the situation and the type of complaint, the response might be different. I think one piece, regardless of which approach is taken, is some piece to circle back around to residents, right? So if it's, we heard you, and this is what we did, and this is what we found. And sometimes it might be we did this immediate enforcement. A month later, we're going to do, you know, we're going to capture that data. But again, it's sort of closing that loop on coming back around. And then the other thing I did want to acknowledge is that we did get input in writing tonight about a lot of material about the places where a speed limit has been dropped to 20 miles per hour, not just in school zones, but in a broader path. And I think that's an interesting idea. It's certainly worth considering. You know, my thought, and I don't know how the rest of the committee feels, I think if we can start capturing some data and really understand where the issues exist, you know, that might be a logical place to start before we entertain, do we do a wholesale consideration of a changed speed limit? But it's not something I'd take off the table. I think it's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
Right, and then for 2020, our accident experience went down about 45%.
Oh, wow.
40 what? 46, okay, 46%, so.
Nobody's going anywhere.
But the traffic complaints were up, so,
Okay.
So say that again, accident reports were down 46%?
yeah, collisions were down 46% as compared to the previous year of 2019. But it seemed like, or it certainly seemed like, the number of traffic complaints or issues that we had were substantially higher. So accidents were down, complaints were up.
Yeah,
Interesting. More people home.
exactly, more people home,
Crabby, okay.
walking around.
Okay, go ahead. Ellen.
Yeah, thank you. I was gonna say the exact same thing, like, I thought it was very interesting, Ms. Moretti's idea about having like the safe park zone, because I think around Wilder, we already have, it's 20 during the school hours, and I really like, that is such a hub of the community, like, to do something around there and see if that's possible to drop that to 20, especially it ties into the next agenda item with Alexander, and it's a little hillier on that street where you can't always see people coming or going. I definitely think I'd want to investigate where that might be a good fit in maybe more than just Wilder Park in our city, where we, like Wagner Center and Barron's, like there's so many kids there all the time.
Right.
So I just really wanted to put that we should continue to talk about that.
And as far as the 20 miles per hour and reducing the speed, I think it's really important if there is a way for us to assess it without a driver knowing there's an officer here, there's a trailer here, or there's some way that this is being documented, because I think, you know, I think we're talking about parking, or as we were, enforcement. We're looking for culture of compliance, you know,
Yes.
not, you know, you could lower it to 20, but I think we talked about a little bit last week. Sometimes that is difficult if people are not used to driving 20 and that's not a typical low speed. It may be very hard to enforce. So, but anyway, yes, I think we've got a lot of opportunities. So, do you think you have any suggestions for Chief, or what to take a look at, or maybe just at least starting with, if we could ask you, could follow up with Public Works to see if there's any opportunity for more collaboration and, you know, with our GIS systems or anything?
Yeah, and I'd really just look at standardizing the response.
Yeah.
You know, knowing that it might be different depending on the type of complaint and the type of concern that's coming. But, you know, looking at that communication back to residents, looking at the data that we're capturing, and then how we're using it. Those would be the, I think, good starting points.
Okay.
Yeah, how is that going to happen with the Elmhurst Connect? Like, is there someone on the police team that will be the person who will get back to people through Elmhurst Connect, or who's going to be giving the feedback?
You
I don't
know,
know how that's gonna work.
yeah.
Right now, it's not really police. It's, Elmhurst Connect is more some of the other issues we went over. Like, it, generally, if you, would you agree that when somebody needs to contact the police, call 911, even if you're not sure if it's 911, and then it can be dispatched? And
Okay. So this is more other stuff for Elmhurst
Right,
Connect.
for evaluating traffic, evaluating speed, evaluating, who knows, somebody might say, you know, there are a lot of people, there's a lot of traffic backup right here during this time. I feel like that's probably something that we all hear, maybe around the schools or maybe around different times of day, where only, like, you know, there are times when, the traffic backup is acute, but then any other time, it's, free-flowing and it's not an issue. But these are the kinds of things that, not necessarily an accident, not necessarily people are speeding, but is there a way to do this better, really? But, okay,
Yeah.
all right, great.
So, yeah, I mean, I would like to request if you guys have a means to find out what other towns, if they have like the 20 miles an hour reduced speed around central gathering places, parks and stuff, like, is it working? Is Hinsdale doing it? Just to know, because that was news to me, that was something we can do, and I like the idea. Just don't know how hard it is to implement.
Yeah, I can mention that to the traffic engineer and have him, come up with some analysis. We're really more on the police department, is more on the enforcement end of that. But we can certainly share it with the traffic engineer.
Yeah, I'm just full of questions. Sorry if you're
It's
not the
okay.
right person.
All right, so thank you. So if you, if there's an opportunity, if you're able to come back to us at some point when you have if you have some information about having some continuity, having some consistency in how questions are posed about speed and safety and traffic and how that's tracked and reported, that would be great.
Yeah, and your
All right.
recommendation, right, thanks.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, moving along, agenda item F, Alexander and Prospect safety improvements. We talked about this a couple of times, and then at our last PANS meeting, we learned this was kind of evaluated with more of a fine-tooth comb, and there are, I don't see that up here. So I guess we'll look back to the meeting from 2 weeks ago where there's some information on this. All right, so will we hear from an engineer, or is this something, because we already have, will be police presenting this for us?
Yeah, I'm going to let
Okay.
Deputy Chief
Deputy
McLean
Chief. Okay,
talk about this. Kent is tied up in one of the other committee meetings.
yep,
But we spoke with him, and we're in support of a stop sign.
okay, thanks.
I'll let Mike talk about it.
Yeah, as you recall from the last meeting, City Engineer Kent Johnson presented a table that showed a 3-year accident history of the intersection of Prospect and Alexander. In reviewing it, several improvements were made to the intersection. The improvement of the light from a normal street light to a Cobra light, which now shines light directly over the intersection for increased pedestrian safety at night. The crosswalk signs were reflective metal was put on there to increase visibility. In the course of looking at those improvements, the accident history, though, and the proximity of Elmhurst University, the library, Wilder Park, the high pedestrian counts, led the city engineer to recommend that this intersection meets the warrants to have stop signs posted, not just on the one side, but on all 3 sides, the eastbound leg, the northbound leg, and the southbound leg. So City Engineer Johnson has prepared the attached committee report recommending that stop signs be placed to increase the safety of the intersection.
Okay. All right. Do we have any additional comments, or thank you, Deputy Chief. Any more comments or questions beyond, I know we reviewed this, we just hadn't really, we didn't have the report prepared. Any other comments or questions? Okay.
No, this is
Thank
great,
you.
thank you.
All right.
Sounds good.
Great. Can we have a motion and a second to approve the report for Alexander and Prospect safety improvements? Motion Alderman Deuter, second Alderman Park. Any last comments or questions? None? Okay. Director Olberg, can you take the roll, please?
Yes, Chairman. Alderman Park?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Deuter?
Aye.
Chairman Plumsky?
Aye. All in favor, none opposed, motion passes unanimously. This will be on consent. Oh, Chief.
I just wanted to mention that the review of this particular intersection came as a result of a referral from this committee.
Yes.
So thank you.
Great, thank you, Chief. All right, so motion passes unanimously. we will see that in 2 weeks. And thank you all for work on this, police and engineering together. Okay, moving on, agenda item G, but before we do, I've noticed we have had some additional individuals come into the chamber since we began this meeting, and it's possible that somebody may have called in. So that said, I would like to offer another opportunity for public comment, if anybody would like to participate. Yep, okay, great. If you've signed in, I don't have the sign-in sheet, but if you could please, I think Ms. Ambrogi, if you could please go ahead and walk up to the microphone, and should we go back there where there's a mic? Would you mind walking, look behind you about 10 feet, there's a microphone. And we ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes, please.
Sure.
Okay.
Elizabeth Ambrogi, 257 Oak Street. I'm here to briefly speak about my support and request for the city to consider providing advanced life support tools for our fire department. I was here some 4 years ago requesting the same thing when we had a really bad tragedy of a child dying in Elmhurst, and here I am again. So I know our firefighters are also asking, they have been for a while, to have advanced life support on their fire trucks. Most of our firefighters are trained paramedics, so they would be able to use the advanced life support without additional training. They've been on the job here in Elmhurst for many years. They're experienced, they're connected to the community, they want to do their job to the best of their ability. And just like listening to you guys, to our police departments talk about, you guys take into consideration what other communities are doing, I hope that we can consider the same with advanced life support, and almost all of the nearby communities have advanced life support for their fire departments, including Oak Brook, Villa Park, Addison, Itasca, Hillside. They all have advanced life support on their fire engines. And many of their firefighters are actually driving their ambulances. They don't outsource an ambulance company like we do. We've been using Superior for 62 years, and I think it's important that we evaluate to see if we're getting the best service. I checked the Better Business Bureau, and Superior has a rating of 1 star. Some of the reviews from people were really startling, people who are sick, who have lost family members, and it's really frightening to listen to how some folks were affected by Superior. Also, I know the paramedics that we have from Superior most often are not experienced. They kind of come and go. They're getting paid $15 to $20 an hour. It's kind of a stepping stone for them. And I think our firefighters would do a much better job. They've been on the job in Elmhurst for 10, 20 some years. They're much more experienced. They're vetted properly. They go through intense background check. To my knowledge, they're checked by our police department. They're given a lie detector. None of these things are done with the paramedics that we get through Superior. And, you know, I looked at Superior's website. They're in 5 states. They have right now like 300 job openings. For a paramedic, their job description, all they're really looking for is you have to be 18 years old, have a high school degree or GED, of course their EMT license, and consent to a background check. And I just don't feel comfortable with having just such minimal stipulations for our paramedics. So, and also quickly, the issue of cost keeps on coming up. It would be, when it was discussed some 4 years ago, about $80,000 for 2 fire engines to be equipped with advanced life support. I think that's something that we as a city can find, A, and B, the Annie Laguerre Foundation offered 4 years ago to pay for that, and that offer is still on the table. And I hope that, again, as you talk about what the police department needs and get their feedback and look at what other communities are doing. You can do the same with the fire department. Talk to our firemen and women, see what other communities are doing to make sure that we are providing our public with the best possible safety features. Thank you.
Thank you. City Manager, I want to ask, we'll get to the next public comment. I think Alderman Kennedy wanted to join us if their committee was concluding. So I just wanted to know if you or could somebody please check in on that, please.
I will
Okay.
let him know
Thank
that
you.
we're on this.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, do we have anybody else here who would like to speak for public comment? Yes, go ahead.
I'm Armeline Moretti. Thank you, Madam Chairperson and committee members. My comment is in regards to the discussion at the February 22nd, 2021 meeting regarding vehicle speeding in Elmhurst. During the discussion, a comment was made regarding drivers driving on a wider street tend to increase their speed because they see the wider road thinking that it runs to a higher speed limit. I would like the committee to consider placing bike lanes on these wider roads in Elmhurst. This would accomplish the road to appear narrower and ideally decrease speeds on them. It would also be a safe place for cyclists to ride, giving them enough space to ride safely on a road shared with a motorized vehicle. I would also like to suggest that the first road that you put that on would be Poplar. It is a great crossroad from north to south. It's very wide, especially from between Villette and Park. And it doesn't allow parking, I believe, on either side of the road. So it would be a great street to start that on. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Yes, please go ahead.
Hello, committee members. My name is Steve Talaski, and I am the president of the Elmhurst Firefighters Union, Local 3541. I wanted to comment tonight to you and let you know that the firefighters are willing and able to provide the citizens of Elmhurst ALS care. As you know, advanced life support is the standard of care in the pre-hospital setting. That is why you contract out ALS services. That is why most of our neighboring communities provide ALS ambulance as well as ALS fire rigs. What your firefighters would like to do is to supplement that service by upgrading the fire rigs with ALS equipment. This service will be provided by the current firefighter paramedics, as well as the future firefighter paramedics that are hired to replace roster vacancies, as well as retirees. We are vested in and we care about the community and the citizens of Elmhurst. This will come at no additional labor costs, pension liabilities, or stipends. You are already paying for the personnel to occupy the fire rigs, and they are responding to 100% of the calls. All that's needed now is your approval and the proper equipment. By adding ALS equipment to the fire rigs, you will have multiple rigs on both sides of town covering 100% of the calls, both emergency as well as non-emergency. In summary, this is going to be an upgraded service and a benefit for the community that will come without any additional labor costs or pension liability. The purchase of equipment would be a one-time cost and not an annual cost such as other options. And as we could explore grants as well as donations, as I just found out, it sounds like the Annie Laguerre Foundation would be willing to chip in for the equipment, so this would be free to the citizens. Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. I'm open to discuss this as you guys wish. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, any other comments? Any call-in public comments that may have, anybody who may have joined after we began this meeting? None? Okay. All right, so fire and emergency response. We've been, I'll take this off a little space here. We've been discussing this agenda item since January, and while we have more to review, I realize that this topic has generated interest, confusion, and misinformation. Tonight, we'll discuss the themes that have emerged in our extensive review and the misunderstanding of the barriers the city encounters related to staffing as it continues to grow. It seems to be increasing. Attorney Mike Durkin is here to participate in our discussion and to provide clarification. Mr. Durkin specializes in collective bargaining and labor relations. We'll hear from Deputy Chief Anishevitz, who will summarize the details we've learned, highlight the outliers we've identified, and touch on some suggestions for potential changes in service provision that we can explore. Because this portion will be mostly review, I don't expect too many questions here at the committee, because we have been discussing this extensively. And this information is, you can look on board docs. We have some of our past posted information available. I think that at the end of our discussion, many of those following may agree that it's possible to highlight both our strengths and identified areas of current and potential concern. Many will agree that it's possible to both value our fire department and their expertise, and to also ask if other models of service provision are comparable, sustainable, and efficient. Because some of what we're discussing may be unfamiliar, I'd like to take this opportunity to define some terms for anybody who's listening in or watching tonight if you haven't been following our minutes or our discussion. So some of the terms you're going to hear are ALS and BLS, so Advanced Life Support, and basic life support. So ALS is what is provided by our most highly trained paramedics. Currently, our firefighters provide BLS, basic life support, so maybe that would be helping if somebody falls. And so essentially Metro Paramedics is a contracted service. When we say Metro, we're referring to our contracted paramedics, and they are providing your emergency response services when it's medical. So if there's an ambulance there or Rescue 1, that's what's provided by Metro. When we refer to Station 1, that is the fire station on the north end of town, which is like at York and Fremont. Medic 1 is the name of the ambulance that is stationed there. Medic 2 and Station 2 are comparable, so the south end of town station and the ambulance that is stationed there. Rescue 1 is the rapid response vehicle that we added. It is staffed by Metro paramedics. It has the equipment and the staff available to provide emergency response services. It does not have the ability to transport patients, though. And because of its unique service, and also because it doesn't transport patients, that is not used for mutual aid, which is something we'll get to a little bit further in this discussion. So the Rescue 1 is that vehicle, that SUV that is able to maneuver through traffic and get to a call, and it start administering medical attention, and it travels throughout the town. Deputy Chief, looks like you have a presentation up ready for us.
Yes, I do, Chair.
All right, so if there's anything else you need, let me know, but if you could please walk us through some of what we've learned and some of the interesting points that we've come across, and perhaps some areas that we can look at. And then I think we're going to have some more targeted questions related to our existing contract and bargaining, and how we're providing our service, and how if we are to contemplate that change, what are some of the potential issues or questions that we'd raise? So, okay.
Chairman
Thank you.
Polonsky, thank you for the introduction, and you had mentioned advanced life support and basic life support.
Use the microphone.
Yep. You had mentioned advanced life support and basic life support in your introduction, and I just wanted to add on to that. As basic life support, we also give the airway adjuncts, and we carry automatic external defibrillators in all our equipment. Within the close proximity to Elmhurst Hospital, it works to our advantage with that basic life support. But I'll get
further into that as we go on in the presentation.
Thank you.
So Chairman Polonsky
Public Affairs and Safety Committee, City Manager Grabowski, those in the audience and listening online, I thank you for your time and want you to know that there's been quite a bit of discussion on the fire department operations over the last couple of meetings. I initially gave a presentation on staffing, personnel, apparatus, and types of incidents that the fire department responds to. There were several questions that were brought up, and I'd like to circle back and answer some of these this evening. I would also like to provide the committee with some additional information I felt needed more explanation. The information I present to you tonight follows the outline I have posted on board docs and only represents my ideas for what I thought would help the committee understand the operations of our department. I expect it to lead to additional conversation if it added it to the agenda as ongoing discussions, potential options. So to start, some of the themes that we've covered over the last couple of meetings has been fire department staffing, activated fire alarms, EMS incidents, NFPA standards, Rescue 1, and what has changed since 2017. I spoke about staffing in the department and that each shift lasts for 24 hours starting at 8 a.m. and ending at 8 a.m. Both our firefighters and paramedics are on a 24, 48-hour shift, meaning that they're off for the next 48 hours. I've included two timelines here, one for 2019 that you'll see on the board now, and one for 2020. The two charts illustrate the 24-hour day when call volumes peak and drop off. As you'll see, there's a pattern throughout the day. I broke this down into 4-hour increments. Again, if you look at this, this is 2019. The next slide is 2020. And this is the entire year. So from that hour in the day, on an annual basis, you'll see the amount of calls that we respond to. One of the things our members spend a lot of their time on during the day is training. Most of the training we do is on Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays through the week, and all members train both in mornings and in the afternoon. Mondays and Fridays are kept for company fire inspections and pre-planning. We do go out on weekends as well to make up for any training that was missed during the week due to calls. Each firefighter is required to complete 240 hours of hands-on training each year in addition to live burns, driver's training, and hazardous material refreshers. We also check safety seats on Mondays, Fridays, and Saturdays. Throughout the week, firefighters will check smoke alarms in homes of residents when they need assistance, and they still try to engage in community events whenever possible. The COVID pandemic has really reduced the amount of community outreach programs we can participate in, and we have transitioned into a lot of virtual programs, but we are ready and eager to get back into the classrooms and provide fire safety lessons to the 1st and 4th grade students when appropriate. Are there any questions I can answer at this time, or do you want me to move on with the presentation and wait until?
I think
okay.
we're good.
If you do, just stop and.
This is more of a summary.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
So as we move into activated alarms, early on I had mentioned that these are the types of incidents that the fire department responds to. What stood out is that we had 733 activated fire alarms in 2020. And I was able to do some additional research with the Fire Prevention Bureau and our IT department and found out that we actually have 656 radio fire alarms throughout the city. Before I go in too far, activated fire alarms are the most frequent type of incident the fire department responds to. False alarms are more common than alarms that announce the presence of a fire and smoke inside of a building. A vast majority of our residential alarms are single offenses and only account for 4% of the repeats. 16.5% of our residential alarms are carbon monoxide in nature, and they are mistaken for an actual fire alarm. On the list you'll see ahead, there's 12 occupancies out of all the alarms that we have in Elmhurst that have had multiple activations in 1 year. These occupancies have the most alarms are hotel, multifamily, dormitory, and it's units with smoke detectors available.
Just for clarification, the activated fire alarms it's when there is not a fire. That's just
When
when
it
it's
is not a fire,
alarm.
correct.
Right, thank you.
Is there any questions on the other? This is a breakdown. If you see on the 2020 incident types on the chart, we responded to 2,065 fire calls in 2020. And that is a breakdown of the most common types of incidents that we respond to at the fire department. So activated fire alarms being number one, and then followed by good intent, smoke odor issues, nothing found.
Okay, so activated fire alarms where there is no fire.
Correct.
But an alarm has been triggered either intentionally or automatically, the fire department is called.
Correct.
Yep.
Hazardous conditions, our structure fire response is there. Now, that is a response. That doesn't mean there's actually 149 fires, and that's, as you see, and as you'll see later on in the presentation, that's for both in-town and mutual aid response combined. Service calls, rescue calls, both elevator and minor extrication, and other response such as invalid assist, outside fires, wires down, flooding type issues.
And the extrication, that also includes vehicle accidents on 290?
Correct.
Yep. Okay. Yes.
Can I ask a question about this? You mentioned for the fire calls that those are calls in Elmhurst and calls outside of Elmhurst that we respond to. Is that true for all these categories, or is that only true for the fire category?
It's actually true for all the categories. If we went on an extrication in, say, Oak Brook, it would be mentioned in this report as well.
So these are all the calls that our department responded to?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. So this is a list of the activated fire alarms, and again, the 733 that we responded to in 2020. The top four are the main categories. So all this is triggered by how we reported in our records management system, which is image trend software. That gives a breakdown of additional information that we could put in so we can look and correct any issues that we may have. We talked about some options that I'll get to in a second about ordinances we can change and trying to address some of these issues with the nuisance alarms that we get under this activity code. So out of the activated fire alarms, there were various reasons for the activated alarm in each occupancy. The most common issue is cooking smoke. I have provided a list of each occupancy that has had over 5 activated fire alarms for the year 2020, and there are only 12 buildings which have multiple alarms throughout the year. The fire alarms that we have responded to 5 times or more in 2020 have been commercial, multifamily, or dorm-type occupancies. Here's a list of the occupancies on the board. One occupancy, which is the Fellows Court complex at St. Charles and West Avenue. We went 88 times last year for activated fire alarms. Majority of those were due to cooking smoke. 190 South Prospect is educational. 16 times for burnt food and activated alarms, no fire in the dorm rooms. And 2 Atrium Way is the 3rd largest nuisance alarm occupancy in the city.
Okay, so thank you. So to summarize, before we move on to another sort of topic within this, we've learned that we had far more calls and need for response for calls where there was no fire, when it was clear that, and there were 733 of them, and some were good intent that there's probably not a good way to prevent those, and these are just, you want someone to call if they see smoke, or if there's any reason to call, absolutely. But we've learned there's some opportunity for us to perhaps prevent some of the calls that we've seen. So when you talked about cooking smoke, activating it, one of the options for us to explore would be, while we do, our code now does, when there's new construction, essentially a home or a living space will be designed so that would be a lot less likely to happen. But there may be ways to go in and advise people on where they should be placing their units, or what type of smoke detector or heat detector they should be using. And if, maybe when you talked about a nuisance alarm, some other municipalities do have the opportunity for, after a certain number of calls where there's no fire, they have an ordinance that basically starts to trigger a process where there's a fine for, calling out the fire department and prompting a response where it's not necessary.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and this breakdown of the activated fire alarms covers what you were talking about. There is actual real issues that cause an alarm to go off, and then there's bad wiring, there's bad placement of detectors, unintentional activation due to cooking smoke. And again, when we get to the numbers like 88, that's 88 times that we're sending 5 pieces of equipment on the street through town emergent to see if this is a true emergency or not. And we deal with them like they are true emergencies. That's why we don't scale back at this time with the response. But that's something that we could look at. We talked about, is there a possibility to send fewer apparatus? If it's a south side activated alarm, can we send south side companies? And that's something that we can discuss further. But for this portion here, as far as the alarm goes, there's ways that we can educate the occupant, and there are communities include fees for nuisance alarms, such as Naperville, Schaumburg, Elgin, Orland Park, Carroll Stream, Batavia, DeKalb, on and on. There's municipalities that have ordinances written in with fees and the actual amount of times. If it's 10 or more, the fees will increase if the fire department continues to go and they don't address the issue with the alarm. So again, with your direction, talking about this and looking into other ordinances, there's programs such as Cry Wolf that are meant for fire prevention bureaus to go in and educate the business owners to reduce the alarms and help reduce the wear and tear on the vehicles and firefighters responding to these issues.
All right. Okay. Go ahead.
Make a comment to that. Thanks, that's great information. I think my initial reaction is I'd rather see us do the education and the, look at penalties for nuisance rather than change the way we respond. I understand why we might look at that to reduce, as you said, the wear and tear and sending out the full set of vehicles. But for those times that it is an emergency, that's the response we want to have. I'd love to focus on reducing those calls.
Absolutely.
That makes a lot of sense.
I agree. Okay. Right.
Okay, so now we get into the EMS response. I've included the most common EMS incidents that the fire department does respond to.
So
We
that
had-
means BLS.
That is, these are BLS and ALS calls. So incidents for
Firefighters
2020,
and
you can see BLS, we had 2,059, and ALS type calls were 1,685. So BLS accounted for 55% of our call volume, and the types of calls are to your left.
Okay. And every firefighter is currently certified to provide BLS?
That's correct.
Yes, okay.
Okay. We had over 681 calls for a patient who had fell. Each time this type of call is received, we dispatch an ambulance along with a truck to help assist the patient. Most of these calls occur at the senior living or assisted living facilities within our jurisdiction. So again, the top 4 type of calls EMS-wise are fall-related, 681, sick person, 620, difficulty breathing is 356, and then we get into our accidents and so on and so forth. You see a drop-off at the end there. I also took a look at what occupancies we respond to most for fall types. And you could see at one facility, 400 West Butterfield Road, we had 141 times that we responded there. 1050 South Euclid, 75. 415 North York, 24. 51.5% of our occupancies have 5 calls or more throughout the year.
I'd like to note that 1500 West Concord, that's outside of Elmhurst, correct? Okay, so, all right, thanks.
So we do pay, we do provide coverage for unincorporated areas of Yorkfield and the Bensville Fire Protection District. So you may see those numbers in here.
Bill, do these, both this chart and the one in front of it, does it include mutual aid that leaves Elmhurst, or is this just within the
These
city?
are all in town. Well, actually, these are our calls that we enter in for that type code, so this would have mutual aid in there as well.
Okay,
If we-
so these are,
Anytime an ambulance would respond to a call for a patient of one of those categories, it's logged in the total.
so this is our units responding regardless of where they're dispatched? But this, and does this include any incoming mutual aid, or is this just when our own department
There
is
would be,
responding?
on some of these, it would be a third ambulance request, possible, yes, that would be included in this as well.
Included. So this is everything that our
Everything for the
department
year.
does and everything that within the city of Elmhurst that we received.
Right, correct.
Okay.
Everything for the year. I'll get into the mutual aid fire calls here. This is just a breakdown of 2019 and 2020 for our fire calls. You'll see the listed, again, this is just mutual aid calls. This is nothing more than a list of who we gave aid to and who we received aid from. If we see something that is non-aligned, if it's getting to be that we are providing too much and not receiving an equal amount back, we do try to address that and work it out, see what the issue is, and then correct that if there's anything we can do to make it where we're not supporting another fire department's service.
So one point that we came across in our review was that we also had this broken down in some other information that we've gone over, that in 2019 and 2020 combined, Elmhurst Fire Companies responded to 66 building fires. And a building fire may or may not actually be a fire, but
Correct.
it's, could be smoke or however what falls under fire, but it could be to a structure, could be a garage, could be a building, could be a shed. So there were 66 outside of Elmhurst for those 2 years combined, but 16 here in Elmhurst. Okay. So, all right, and I know that you're going to go over the mutual aid for EMS, but before we do that, some of what we discussed is, first of all, perhaps we are not seeing a lot of building fires here, and part of that, or largely it's because of the robust education program that our fire department provides, and we also have pretty strict building codes that some of our surrounding, or most of our surrounding communities do not have. So we're less likely to, be in a position for a fire to start. So, and if other municipalities don't have those strict requirements or the level of education that we provide, while we will see a reduction and just a low number of building fires, some of those other ones might not. So some of what we've discussed is maybe other ways to look at how we can strike a better balance other than what has been typical. We're just calling, hey, it looks like we're giving more assistance than receiving it, but perhaps there's some other way for us to come to more formal agreement or to figure out a better way to see a balance there.
Correct.
Okay, thanks. Yes. Go ahead, we can all just chat whenever. Thanks.
2020, the Bensonville number of aid given to Bensonville was much higher than earlier years.
And that's a prime example, a great question, and a good example of how we worked with another community that was going through some difficult times with staffing and apparatus, and they went for a referendum to correct that, and were successful, and they were able to staff additional equipment. So that has been corrected. You'll see that number drop back to the normal range next year.
Okay.
It was just for a short period of time that we were helping them with their response.
Good answer, thanks.
The next slide is the mutual aid, EMS, again, who we received aid from and who we gave aid to. Now, when you look at this chart, to keep it consistent, I use the same towns. It's very rare for us to send ambulance to a Glenside or a Glen Ellen because of the distance to get there, the time it requires a drive there. It would have to be an escalated alarm for us to send a unit to one of those jurisdictions. So you'll see a lot of zeros, but I wanted to use the same chart to show the possibilities that are there.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I'm going to get into NFPA standards. So the National Fire Protection Association establishes recommendations for fire and EMS. And a lot of these break down the fire response in more detail, but again, we did mention this at one of the previous meetings, and I wanted to go over it one more time as far as the EMS is concerned. We'll talk about the 1710 standard for fire, first of all. When we have a low hazard or a one single-family home, they recommend having 15 firefighters on the scene to help with a fire in a low hazard type structure. A medium hazard structure is an apartment, commercial occupancy, or a big commercial industrial building, and we would require 28 firefighters. You'll see the little asterisk next to it. That says that lieutenants, captains, battalion chiefs, if the department is included in that number as well. It's not just firefighters. High hazards are schools, hospitals, nursing home, high-rise buildings, and we're looking at 43 firefighters. The NFPA standards were first established in 2001 and contain staffing standards and for predominantly career departments. Based on a 2,000 square foot, two-story residential home is their example.
Bill, can you clarify, if this is, when there's a reference to a career department, what are the alternatives? If you don't have a career department, how else would you?
And again, that's why it's a recommendation, because there are volunteer or paid-on-call departments that just cannot staff the apparatus. They'll rely on mutual aid or auto aid, and that's where that number will finally come to fruition, is if they call in the aid, but they cannot mandate a small department that does not have the resources to have this type of personnel.
Okay. So ours is considered career, but in other communities, they might have a volunteer department, or you said a paid-on-call?
Correct.
Department, okay. And I assume a career department is the most sophisticated, the most highly trained and.
Right, and that's the most common in the area here.
Okay.
A lot of departments are utilizing part-time, some are using paid-on-call, and I have a chart at the end that'll show that as well.
Okay, thanks.
So NFPA 1710 is, again, they use several factors to weigh in on response times. So they use a alarm time, a turnout time, and an arrival time. The alarm time is the time of dispatch to the time, so the time the dispatcher gets the information to the time that they push it out to the stations, so the fire department gets the alert. And they have 64 seconds to do that 90% of the time. The turnout time is the time that the call is received from the time that we get in the apparatus and start to drive out of the station with our equipment on, and that's another 80 seconds. The first apparatus on the scene should be there in 240 seconds, and if you add that up, we have 6 minutes and 40 seconds from the time of dispatch until the time that we arrive on scene. As we go into additional alarms and larger buildings, high hazard type occupancies, the time increases, and Elmhurst far out exceeds these expectations and recommendations from NFPA. NFPA 1710 also recognizes EMS and recommends that there's a 60-second turnout time and a 240-second travel time. Together, that's 300 seconds or 5 minutes for the first BLS vehicle on scene. 1710 also looks at ALS and says that there should be a 60-second turnout time and a 480-second travel time for a 9-minute or less response time. Again, that's for ALS. And these both go at 90% of dispatched incidents. So we do have outliers. There are times where we don't have the exact location, or it's a long traveled, up on the 290 and traffic's tight, so we can't get there on time. And so there are some outliers, but 90% of the time we're expected to meet these standards. And the average response time for both fire and EMS is 4 minutes and 30 seconds within Elmhurst in 2020.
Can you just say that one more time, Bill?
4 minutes and 30 seconds for the first arriving unit on scene in Elmhurst. So it could be an engine, it could be an ambulance, it could be a truck, but one of our vehicles, no matter what type of call, is there in 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Could be Rescue 1. Actually, Rescue 1, I think, is 417, to be exact.
But the standard speaks to the 5-minute.
Correct.
Yep.
Standard speaks to the 5-minute.
5 minutes for BLS, but 9 minutes for ALS.
Correct.
Right? Okay.
A little bit more on just an example of Elmhurst and the NFPA standards. Activated fire alarm. This is our complement that we send. We have a battalion chief, 2 lieutenants, and 6 firefighters for personnel of 9. 2 engines, a truck, and a battalion chief to go to activate a fire alarm. On a structure fire response, a standard response in all Fire East departments, that's 10 departments that make up our dispatch area, all the surrounding towns, we all agreed to send the same amount of equipment on all structure fires. And that's 5 chiefs, 4 engines, 3 trucks, 3 ambulances, and a squad. So if you add up the personnel on scene there, you come to 35. And I've also outlined in red what we receive mutual aid. So if Elmhurst gets a reported structure fire right now, we're getting 2 mutual aid chiefs, 2 mutual aid engines, a mutual aid truck, a mutual aid ambulance, and a squad. No, it's coming up.
Bill, can you clarify what's an ambulance versus a squad?
A squad carries heavy rescue equipment like technical rescue, extrication, confined space, that type of equipment. A few years back, when we purchased our new fire engine, we converted what we had as an old rescue squad and put all that equipment onto the engine. It was large enough to be both an engine and a squad. But since it's available, we will take a squad from a neighboring town and dedicate our engine, if need be, to just fire suppression.
And you said this is the standard response. This isn't just dictated by us. This is the
Correct.
agreed
And we
upon
could-
response.
Yes, yeah, we can change this whenever we would like. And again, if something, if we are in a computer-aided dispatch system, so if we have a standard running order where, let's say, for instance, Villa Park is going to assist us at a structure fire, if they're unavailable to send, it'll go right to the next community that's closest and pull that engine and bring it to our town. Same thing when Villa Park has a fire, we set it up that way. So we're always covered, but we can change that response at any time. We're our own, we set our own response. There's no ordinances or rules, MABUS rules or anything like that that tell us what we have to send.
Okay, so this is as we've decided?
Yes, this is as we've decided.
And if Villa Park was doing the same presentation, they might have a different set of equipment that responds?
Yes,
or-
well, for their own alarms. On structure fires, like I said, we meet as chiefs to discuss operations and what we could share and do together.
Yeah.
And we all agreed to do this for a structure fire, so on your left, that column. On an
Okay.
activated fire alarm, there are certain departments that do not have a battalion chief. There are certain departments that don't have a squad, or maybe they only have 1 engine and 1 ambulance, so they do what they want with their own local alarms.
Okay. Got it, thank you.
And that goes for their EMS calls as well. We in Elmhurst send a fire rig on every EMS call. And there are communities that don't have the personnel to do that, so it's all up to what your department wants.
Okay.
Okay? So we'll get into Rescue 1. Rescue 1, in 2016, the fire department recognized the need to close a gap it took in time to get ALS service to the scene. Mutual aid ambulances were being requested after our second ambulance was committed. Dispatch systems were antiquated, and it took additional time to request and process these requests for mutual aid equipment. In 2017, Rescue 1 was put into service to reduce the amount of time it took to initiate ALS care on the scene. Rescue 1 is a smaller, more maneuverable vehicle that is able to get through town easier than a fire engine or a ladder truck. Rescue 1 is dedicated to the city of Elmhurst and does not leave its boundaries. Rescue 1 moves back and forth between the north and the south side of town and provides a second layer of coverage when the primary ambulance is dispatched to a call. In 2020, Rescue 1 was moved to Station 2 due to the increased number of incidents and the ability to get this vehicle to outlying districts in ample time. Data gathered from January 1st, 2020 until April 22nd, 2020 helped to solidify this move. This move has reduced the number of incidents that Rescue 1 had to change districts for, and it has been able to respond to second medic requests in less times than in previous years. So on this slide, you'll see that Rescue 1 was stationed at Fire Station 1 from its inception in 17 until 2020. After we reviewed the data, as you could see on the previous slides, the falls and how many were on the southwest side of our district, it proved that moving Rescue 1 to Station 2 just to house it. It does, again, float from north to south. It responded quicker to the District 21, which is our southwest district, and it includes Artist Senior Living, Lexington Square, Lexington Health Care, Park Place. These are facilities that we're at multiple times a day, and it benefits the city by having it at Station 2.
So is it correct to say that Rescue 1 is stationed at Station 2 on the south end of town, and based on what we've learned, there are a number of incidents there, mostly falls, that we've seen, like particularly there's one address that had, I think, the greatest number of falls that we have throughout the city. Not only does it allow it to respond there, but anytime the ambulance at the north end of town, if that is called out, Rescue 1 travels to its place.
That's correct. Right,
Okay,
yep.
so we have, it's constantly moving. If it's stationary, only if there isn't a call, and the call could be directly for it to be servicing somebody in need or to take the place of an ambulance.
That's right.
Okay,
Yeah, as soon as the call comes in on the north side, Rescue 1 is moving to the north to cover that ambulance that leaves.
okay.
Here's an example of District 21 in the city. So, to your right, on the lower end of the screen, District 21 is what I'm referring to.
Okay.
So Rescue 1 has proved its worth since going into service in 2017, and it has worked well for our department and the entire city. It has helped us to reduce the amount of third ambulance requests by a third. In 2017, we had over 150 calls for a third ambulance request. We're at 105 in 2020. I credit that to the Rescue 1 and being able to assess a patient and cancel a mutual aid request or a third ambulance request.
Bill, can you just say that again? I think that's a key piece, and is that written down somewhere, or is that just in your presentation?
This is my just discussion.
Okay, can you just say that one more time?
In 2017, we had 150 calls for third ambulance requests. In 2020, it's at 105.
And so is that, just to clarify, that's times where we rely on mutual aid, or
It's
that's?
times when a third ambulance request was dispatched. So Rescue 1 can get to the scene, assess the patient, cancel it, treat. One of our ambulances could come up from the hospital and provide care. It's a variety of different things, but a third ambulance request is initiated, and then Rescue 1 is on the scene to help with the care. And a third ambulance request can be a BLS, it could be an ALS, it's just a third ambulance request. Someone could have been difficulty breathing, it could be a fall, whichever. So,
Okay, so that's not necessarily mutual aid, because you're saying sometimes our Rescue 1 responds.
it will respond. Anytime, so Medic 1 goes on a call, Rescue 1 will head north. If Rescue 2 goes on a call, Rescue 1 stays there, and Medic 1 comes down to handle that call. If a third call comes in, Rescue 1 will go to the third call, and it closes that gap from the time that we're waiting for ALS care, if it is a mutual aid ambulance or one of our ambulances, to free up from the hospital to provide care for that patient.
Okay, I'm trying to get to the number of times that we rely on mutual aid for our ALS response.
Okay?
And that might, I don't think that's tucked into this
I
number.
think
That
I'll
might be
have
a
to get
separate
that for
number.
you, I'll do a little bit more,
Okay,
okay?
thanks.
You're welcome. So as I said, Rescue 1 is staffed with one paramedic with ALS equipment, and it's constantly moving from the south side to the north side of town when the primary medic unit is dispatched to an EMS call. Rescue 1 has provided coverage during special events like the Turkey Trot, St. Patrick's Day Parade, and the Elmhurst Classic Bike Race. It works extremely well at closing the gap in time it takes to get ALS care to a critical patient by using a contract medic. It saves money by not having to staff with a union firefighter with a higher salary, benefits, and pension costs. Rescue 1 was not put in service to reduce calls or reduce the need for mutual aid. It was put in service to reduce the time it takes to get ALS treatment to those who need it quickly. And I believe as the city deals with the financial deficit that it is in and continues to look for ways to provide quality service to residents at a lower cost, Rescue 1 provides exactly what we need. Having the ability to move this vehicle to provide ALS service has proven effective, and as we move forward into 2021, we are looking at possible reductions, moving equipment, using smaller equipment, different vehicles to respond to calls, and adding vehicles like Rescue 1 so that we can continue to provide superior care to our residents without having an impact on the overall budget. On the board, you can see several accomplishments that we've received over the years. Both the fire department and paramedics have won the Elmhurst Hospital Run of the Year in 2018 and 2019. The Metro paramedics that are on Rescue 1 and in our ambulances have won the Mission Lifeline Award from American Heart Association, and we together have won several Elmhurst Edwards Run of the Month awards. 2016, there was 4. 2017, there were 4. 2018, 2, and 2019, 1.
So all of these up here, these are calls where our fire department and Metro paramedics combined reported to the calls.
Correct.
And served, okay. And I know that there was one other award. City Manager Grabowski, what did Rescue 1, how was it recognized by DMMC?
Thank you, Chair. That was, as you said, the DuPage Mayor and Managers Conference annually hosts an innovation award, and that's where municipalities within DuPage County get together and bring one of the innovative ideas that they've had. We did bring the Rescue 1 vehicle to that, and were awarded the Innovation Award for that year.
Thank you.
If there's any other questions on Rescue 1, we're going to move into firefighter, the pension costs. What I've done here is broke down the levy amount for a firefighter pension cost from 2011 to 2020. And you'll see the percentage of increase from each year. And this is the approximate salary and pension cost of a 30-year pension firefighter versus a contract paramedic. To the left, you'll see the benefits and salary that adds up, and we get the final calculation, $2,307,201, 20304. And to your left is the contract paramedic with their average salary. Again, these are 5-year bands. So you'll see from 1 to 5 years is the average salary over the 5 years, again, 6 to 10. That's how it's broken down on this chart. So each benefit item is added up for 5 years.
Bill, can you just say for folks who are listening in and maybe aren't following along on this, and those numbers are pretty small, can you just say those amounts again for those?
Yeah, if you total the average cost of a firefighter with the pension contribution is $2,307,203.04. And for the contract, it is $1,149,369.92.
For one contracted staff person.
One,
Yep.
yeah, one firefighter and one contract paramedic side by side.
Okay.
This is just a visual on where your property taxes go to. You'll see a dollar bill broken up at the city's portion of the tax, 7%. 66% of that is attributable to the fire and police pension costs. And then this is a copy of a tax bill where you can find this on your tax bill so you could understand a little bit more about what you're paying and where you're paying.
So that 240, if we're looking at this, 240.03, and maybe this is more of a question for City Manager Grabowski, when a resident sees that on their tax bill, what does that cover?
So that would cover the operations of the city that we levy for.
Okay.
We have other revenue sources such as sales tax and permit fees, but we do levy for operations, and that's what the $240 would represent.
All right, so there are 2 line items that residents will see that are from the city, and I'm not talking about library with their own board, but from the city. One is, for most part, city operations, and then the second one is for the pensions. Okay,
That's correct.
thank you.
And that number's for police and fire, correct?
That's correct.
This last slide here is a overview of the surrounding departments and their staffing. We talked a little bit about the organizational charts for departments in our previous conversations. So you can see some of the departments here are part-time. We have some paid on-call, volunteers. Some are made up of contract paramedics. Wheaton Fire Department Wheaton and Glen Ellen have the same type of service that we provide, and that's the BLS engine companies with the ALS ambulances. And this is just an overall breakdown of all the personnel from chief to firefighter.
Okay, so when we're talking about the comparable departments, we went through this a little bit more extensively, and you could probably find anybody following along. We have a slide per each department that's reviewed here. But so Glen Ellen is mostly a volunteer department, and there are 2 other municipalities here that have contract paramedics. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, Chair.
2 other municipalities here, or 3, have contract paramedics.
You have Glen Ellen has contract paramedics. Oak Brook has contract paramedics.
And Wheaton?
Wheaton.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And one thing that we've learned also is that every department will structure its management and its direct service provider. That organization will look a little bit different everywhere. But it seems that in Elmhurst, perhaps our lieutenants might take on more of a hybrid role where part management, but also assisting live, more hands-on. But what we have learned, it appears that we could there may be an opportunity to take a look at how we're structuring so that we are not as management heavy compared to the other departments.
That's correct. So since 2017, a lot has changed with not only our department, but our dispatch centers. We have changed response procedures and now send fire suppression companies on every EMS call. We have changed how we respond to some non-life-threatening emergencies and respond non-emergent. We have a new dispatch center with new computer-aided dispatch computers and dispatch software, which allows us to utilize mutual aid companies without delays. We also have new reporting procedures and new records management systems, as I mentioned, image trend in place to give us more accurate data. I thank you for allowing me the time to explain our operations with you, and as I go over this information, you may have other questions. And I know that our administration is looking at every possible option to reduce costs as we continue to provide the same quality of service to our residents. Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Chief. That's a lot to put together. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have any questions about that portion of our presentation? Yes, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. The hospital has ambulances and paramedics too?
They go there to the ER to transport, but they do not staff their own ambulances.
Oh, okay, so when does an ambulance from the hospital, or is it just like our ambulances arrive at the scene and take them to the hospital?
No, there could be quite a few ambulances at the hospital at once. So what happens when our ambulance gets to the ER, they'll transfer the patient over to the nursing staff, and as they're writing their reports, a lot of the time they'll work on sanitizing the ambulance and getting the report completed. But if a second call or third call comes in, they'll jump out of the ambulance, jump and take the call in. So again, that's the time from the ambulance to get from the hospital to the incident, and Rescue 1 is filling that little gap in between there. But there are several ambulances in our jurisdiction. We do benefit from having the hospital there. Yeah. So if we had a third or fourth ambulance and we needed one, they're in service there as well to respond to our incidents.
But the hospital doesn't have
the hospital does not have any.
Okay,
no.
Gotcha. That's what I was curious about. Okay.
Bill, can you talk a little bit about the training that our paramedics received?
All of our paramedics receive continuing education through Elmhurst Hospital. There's a nurse on staff who provides the training to us. All paramedics have to complete a certain number of hours per year to keep their license, and I believe it's 120, I believe. I might be off a little bit on that, but they'll go through the presentation and the hands-on skills at our station with the nurse from Elmhurst Hospital. To become a paramedic, you have to go through a year worth of training and do clinical rotations at the hospital to get your license. And then once you get your license, it's again monthly fee that you take to maintain that license.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, thanks, we appreciate
welcome.
that. We also would like to continue our discussion, talking more about the way in which we provide our services in-house versus contractor, where we do both. And we have City Attorney Mike Durkin, who specializes in labor relations and bargaining, to help answer some questions for us. I know there are a number of opinions surrounding the arrangement that we have with Metro paramedics and the split of responsibilities between our contract staff. I'm going to do this for spaced a little bit here. Between our contract staff and our full-time firefighters. I appreciate you answering our questions so we can all better understand our current arrangements, but also potential possibilities or consequences if we contemplated changing those. So, you know, I'm hoping if anybody, our committee, if we have questions, just please jump in. I would like to start, though, is if you could explain to us the substitute clause, please.
The Substitutes Act is a state statute that was effective in 2008. The General Assembly passed a law limited to fire departments, modifying Division 2.1 of the Municipal Code, which is the Police and Fire Commission Act. And that statute was modified to provide that you cannot use either as a temporary replacement or a permanent replacement to replace a firefighter that in a unionized department that was not certified off of that fire commission list. So the statute provides an interesting term that the union can negotiate, allowing an employer to bypass that Substitutes Act, but that bargaining is labeled permissive bargaining, which in essence, it's counterintuitive. Permissive would seem like, okay, it's okay to bargain over a permissive subject to bargaining. However, there's a distinction drawn between a mandatory subject to bargaining, which involves wages, benefits, terms and conditions of employment. You are required to bargain over mandatory subjects of bargaining, whereas a permissive subject of bargaining is one that either side can say, no, I don't want to bargain over that, and then you cannot bargain a permissive subject to impasse or take it in the fire service to interest arbitration. The third category is a prohibited subject to bargaining, which everybody would understand what that entails. So with respect to this topic that you asked me to come and address tonight, I can tell you to start off the discussion that there are two certainties regarding collective bargaining obligations regarding the issue before you, the use of union firefighter paramedics to perform ALS paramedic functions. There are two certainties, and there are a number of uncertainties. The two certainties are that there is no current obligation in Elmhurst to bargain over paramedic activities, since those activities are not performed by bargaining unit members. So that currently is not bargaining unit work, and so it's a certainty by established case law that the city's not obligated to bargain over that topic. The other certainty is that there will be a duty to bargain paramedic activities if you utilize bargain unit members to perform paramedic activities, including ALS engine staffing. So there's a certainty that there will be an obligation to bargain over that activity. One of the uncertainties, however, is the scope of such bargaining if you introduce ALS paramedics into the bargaining unit. That scope is unknown, and whether it would include simply the current activities that are performed by the Metro contract paramedics that you have, whether it would include that or whether it would be limited in some fashion to only the ALS activities that the bargain unit members would be performing, that is an unknown. And there's a great deal of uncertainty as to which way the Labor Board would handle such a topic, and that is illustrated by a recent case involving the city of Mattoon. If you don't mind, I can go into that for illustration purposes. A little bit lengthy, but the city of Mattoon, prior to 2017, operated an ambulance service by the city staffing 1/3 of the time and two different companies, contracted companies, performing 2/3 of the time. So they rotated amongst three entities, the city being one of the three entities. And in 2017, the city council in the city of Mattoon adopted a resolution to eliminate its ambulance service. And the intention was to have the other two contract ambulance companies that were already servicing 2/3 of the time to perform those activities. So the fire union in the city of Mattoon didn't like that topic, so they filed a grievance. And that grievance proceeded to an arbitration hearing where an arbitrator, a neutral arbitrator, ruled in favor of the city, that the city had the right to eliminate its ambulance service. And not being satisfied with that decision, the fire union then filed an unfair labor practice charge with the Illinois Labor Relations Board, alleging that the city of Mattoon had somehow violated the state law, including the Substitutes Act. The Illinois Labor Relations Board's executive director reviewed the complaint and dismissed that complaint on the basis that there should have been a deferral to that arbitrator's ruling, and that since the arbitrator had ruled that the city had not violated the contract, he recommended dismissing the unfair labor practice charges that the union had filed. The union, once again, not being satisfied with that result, appealed that decision to the full Labor Relations Board. The Labor Relations Board in, I believe it was April of 2018, ruled that the executive director was correct, that the arbitrator's decision should bind the parties in this case, and dismissed the unfair labor practice charge. Once again, not being satisfied with that response, when the city of Mattoon implemented its decision to eliminate its ambulance service and to utilize the two contract medic companies, the union then filed additional unfair labor practice charges. The process before the Labor Board is to have an administrative law judge hear the evidence in that case and then make a recommendation to the full Labor Board. Following an evidentiary hearing, the administrative law judge dismissed the unfair labor practice charge and recommended that the decision be that the city did not commit unfair labor practices when it utilized these other contract medics. So that decision came down a little over 2 years following the decision in the first case, in which both the arbitrator and the labor board ruled that the city had not violated the law. So lo and behold, in August of 2020, a newly constituted labor board, remember we had a change in the governorship, and the constitution of the labor board changed. That newly constituted labor board held that the administrative law judge who heard the evidence was wrong, and that indeed the employer did commit an unfair labor practice charge by not bargaining with the union over its decision to utilize these other contract medics who, as I stated before, had previously been providing 2/3 of the coverage. So with that status of the law, it's a big question mark as to what extent bargaining would be required in the city of Elmhurst if you introduced ALS paramedics. You would have some bargaining obligation. As I said, the scope of that bargaining obligation is anyone's guess right now because there's been no case before the labor board. And even if there was, with the labor board seemingly willing to overrule itself or overturn its prior decisions, there's not much guidance out there. So those are my preliminary remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Please hop in.
Could I ask, when you talk about there would be some bargaining obligation, say more about that. What would be the implications of opening up to bargaining?
Well, in addition to bargaining over what the wages and benefits and terms and conditions of employment of those bargaining unit members would be that we're performing the paramedic functions, the topic of whether or not you could continue to utilize the contract medics would be my biggest concern, whether the labor board would determine that you would only be required to bargain over those ALS functions, or once the union got their foot in the door by performing some paramedic functions, does that open up the entire scope of paramedic functions? As long as they are not performing those paramedic functions, the city has no obligation to bargain. Once they get their foot in the door, that door cannot be closed, but more importantly, can it be forced even wider open? And we don't know that. I'm aware of a statement in that City of Mattoon case, the one that was issued in August of 2020. The Labor Board held a union is free to agree to the use of such individuals, contract paramedics, but the Substitutes Act also makes such an agreement a permissive subject of bargaining. Thus, a union cannot be forced to continue to agree, in effect, to waive its statutory right. So the Labor Board has said that you can't force the union to continue to waive that obligation to bargain over those ALS functions. You can't enter into an agreement in perpetuity with no end date, et cetera. There's always a continuing obligation to bargain when your contracts expire, and those are the uncertainties that you face.
So along those lines, if, when you mention you can't enter into a contract in perpetuity, so if, for example, a bargaining unit said, you know what, we will provide this service, but we agree not to bring it up, we're not going to bargain it, you know, that really doesn't hold water because that can't last forever. The nature of contracts is that the city has to utilize them for other operations, like insurance. We can't just have a contract that goes forever with a union or with another group. There have to be limits to our contracts. And essentially, once that contract ends, that's where you said perhaps the door could be forced even wider open.
Yes, that'd be my concern, and once again, there's no roadmap in front of us to chart that territory with respect to those continuing obligations to bargain. In terms of lengths of contracts, the statute states that for collective bargaining agreements subject to your appropriation requirement, you can negotiate multiple year agreements, but there's no contract that I'm aware of that was entered into for anyone's lifetime or until the world ends. So things are subject to change. I did hear the first speaker tonight at the public session for a public comment address the fact that the thought is to replace your contract medics, not just on ALS engines, but to utilize the Silver Spanner program, which is to bring in other union firefighter paramedics to staff your department until you're up and running on your own two legs with all in-house firefighter paramedics. And if that's the goal, then I would take issue with the statement that that wouldn't involve any increased costs or increased pension contributions. You currently don't pay pension contributions for those firefighter paramedics that are provided by Metro. I would say that would no longer be the case if you replaced those individuals with full-time employees. They're subject to the Illinois pension laws. You can't eliminate that, you can't waive it, you can't modify it, you can't agree with the union that you won't pay what you're required to pay under the pension code. So
we, by moving a service or something that we provide to a pensionable or to a protected unit, we are subject not only to the state pension laws, but then we also lose our local control on some of that service provision. If we had a service that's contract, we have the ability to manage that contract based on need, increase or decrease. But once we have it in-house with a protected unit, let's say firefighters that are part of the union, we lose not just the ability to make some decisions based on what we may identify as needs or not. That's something that is subject to bargaining.
staffing definitely would be in
Yep.
terms of shift staffing, not in terms of overall size of the department, but certainly minimum shift staffing became a mandatory subject of bargaining in fire unions only in the state of Illinois in 2015.
Okay.
The police don't have that provision in the statute. The police don't have a Substitutes Act. These are all strictly limited to firefighter issues.
Okay. So in addition to some of the control that would be, it would be different, it's also, these employees would be subject to the pension laws and, you know, the contributions that the city makes and the amount that they're paid, not just with benefits, but with pension.
Yes, if you make any employee in the fire department a sworn firefighter in the fire department, they're subject to the Illinois pension statute. If you hire a secretary instead of contracting out for a secretary, you hire a secretary in-house, you have IMRF pension obligations, and you can't get away from those if those employees qualify.
Can I just ask a question? You've made great points about the uncertainty as it relates to the Metro contract. If you take that piece aside, just setting that aside for right now, what has been your experience when you're working with a union and you ask the union employees to provide a greater level of service that requires greater training? Would you expect that there's a cost associated with that, or that comes up in the next contract renewal?
Well, it could. We don't control the topics that the union would propose, but if you're asking whether I have seen proposals to pay firefighters who perform different functions a different amount of money, of course I've seen that. I'm aware of contracts that have those provisions. So, you know, it's whatever you can think of.
I've got a question that's sort of related, but it's probably more for chief or deputy chief. If we considered providing ALS through our fire department by our firefighters, how many firefighters would we need to provide that service? So instead of having the contract paramedics, if we wanted to bring that in-house, how many firefighters would we need?
It's estimated that we would need, due to time off, sick time, vacation time, Kelly vacation, all that combined, we're looking at 21 additional personnel to start the ALS program,
Okay.
to take over the entire thing, ambulances and everything. I actually put together an additional slide in case you asked a question on what it would entail as far as cost, ambulance costs, fees, training,
Okay.
and such, if you wanted to take a look
Okay.
at.
Well, let's first, maybe if we can go over, thank you,
Sure.
some questions about just generally how this works broader, but then yet I've asked staff if they could put together what potentially this could mean if we considered some of these changes. So I don't know if we have more questions for Attorney Durkin.
No, I just have like a operations question. I forget, does Metro own the ambulances,
Yes.
or are those
Yep.
ours? Okay.
Yep, so
So if we were to do this, then we'd have to buy some ambulances.
Yep. So I'm hoping we can take a look. So generally, if what we're providing now, we've learned with Mattoon, even though the city provided its own service, its own paramedic service, and it also contracted at the same time, because just with the bargaining laws and just with the ability for a bargaining unit to bring that to the table, even though it already was contract and even though it was in-house, that ultimately that municipality was not really able to shift how it provided its service outside, just completely to be contract.
They couldn't do that without bargaining with the
Right.
union about it. That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. I'd like to know if we could, get some insight. I was, in our discussion, planning for this, anticipating how could we give an idea for what this may mean if we decided, what if we terminated our Metro contract and we wanted to provide this entirely in-house? What would that look like? And what, as far as costs, and even if, we're not even considering, let's say that we have equipment donated for every truck, that's not an issue. That we were just taking a look at, all right, what if we wanted to move this in-house? What would be on the table?
So again, we have 15 contract paramedics, assuming that we took the entire thing over and had to staff 15 paramedics, additional 6 to cover the time off. That's a total of 21 paramedics at the current salary and benefit package that we discussed earlier. We have 3 ambulances, 2 primary ambulances and 1 in reserve in case one were to go down. So the 3 ambulances would be $675,000. The equipment to staff an ambulance is around $75,000. Again, that could be something that is possibly donated, but if it's not, we're on $225,000. We discussed earlier the training to get the personnel to the paramedic ALS status, continuing education. You really can't put a number on it. I don't know how many shifts it would involve to get these hours in. But that is in addition to the $3.5 million you see there for the startup costs.
Okay. And do you have longer-term costs?
Well, additional equipment when it breaks, You know, I'm sure we're on a replacement schedule every 5 years right now with our current ambulances. Continuing education with training, that would be in addition to like a longevity cost there.
Can we go back to the slide? Oh, go ahead.
No, just a quick question. If we're gonna add 21 new paramedics, is there room in the firehouses for them? Would they kind of live around there, like the?
So we have the 15 in there already. It would be an additional 6.
Each in this
yeah,
space?
Yeah, so we be broken up between 2 per shift. I think we would be able to do that.
Can you scroll back to the page that shows the comparison of a union firefighter and a contract paramedic? This is 30, this is just for one person per one person.
Correct.
So essentially, for us to make a change, we would take a look at this. And I understand that we would be talking about individual people that have different levels of experience, and of course, there are a lot more variables. But to simplify, taking a look at this, we see the discrepancy as it exists when you're looking one-to-one. But
Correct.
if we take those contract and we fold them in and we instead hire, we have 21 firefighters, so 21 additional positions that are at this higher rate, and then over time. And then we also learned about the unpredictability of the pension obligations that
Correct.
we've seen. You know, I think I've seen some comments, oh, it's only a few bucks. Like, these are not a few bucks, right? These are millions of dollars. And, you know, I'd want to go back to the original referral. And we're not done with this topic, but I do think it's important for an update, just because the level of interest, the number of questions. But the referral seeks to review how we're providing our services and look into a way that we can provide the same high quality or better services as far as safety goes, and if we could do it more efficiently. So what we're looking at is, we don't want to have a decline in service. We don't want to have the quality decline. We want to minimally keep that the same, even though we far exceed expectations. And even though we have, with our contract service, won awards, not just for the specific runs of the month, but the Innovation Award, we don't want to see any decline. Part of what we're doing is taking a look at what we provide and ways in which we can make that better. I don't see how all the uncertainty surrounding opening up the bargaining opportunity, in addition to the knowns that we have, including a look back and just the existing conditions of what it costs to fund a union employee and a contract employee. It seems like more than a big risk, and it's more than a few dollars.
Chairman, I'm sorry, could I ask the deputy chief a
Sure.
question about this chart?
Yeah.
So this chart demonstrates the 30-year cost for the difference between one contract medic and one in-house firefighter paramedic.
Correct.
Is it correct to say that then, compared to the prior chart where you showed an annual cost of $2.3 million in personnel costs, that covered everybody, the 21, for 1 year?
Right.
So relating that back to this chart, would you then say you'd have to multiply both the bottom number on the left-hand side by 21?
That's correct.
And the bottom number on the right-hand side? So I don't know if is that 800,000? I should put my glasses on and read it, but that won't help. It's way
I
too
gave you
far
a
away.
copy in front as well with the bigger,
Thought maybe your younger eyes could just give me those numbers. What's the difference in the two costs on this chart?
yeah, it's
You're
more than
showing
that. It's
right
a
now?
million,
I could see it now.
million four.
from here.
Okay. Times 21.
So you'd multiply that number then by 21, and that would be your long-term cost for 30 years. And then I don't think Elmhurst is going to go away in 30 years. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you. You know, I think, go ahead. Question.
Well, and I had a question. I don't know if this takes into account the nuances of the relationship that we have with Metro and the cost savings that is repaid back to us. Like, I don't know how to explain it because
yeah.
I'm so new
So
with
that's, you know, I think
PNS.
that's just generally, this takes a look at how much it costs us to provide our service. We have a contract where we pay an amount monthly, and then it's an estimate for how much service will be provided. It's hard to know. And then we typically end up getting money back at the end of the year. But this takes into account the real amount of money that we spend for our, when it's broken down per contracted paramedic.
But is it not reduced by the historical amount of money that we would get back? Because that would be like the real net cost?
Go ahead.
I think, and someone can correct me, all ambulance service has the ability to recoup. You can bill out for ambulance service,
Correct.
right? So whether it's being provided by Metro or provided somehow in-house, you still have a billing service where you're charging for that service to the people who use it, right? Like whether you're getting an ambulance ride from Metro or from someone's in-house firefighter paramedic unit, you're still going to get a bill for an ambulance ride.
Oh, okay, so even if we did it in-house, then we would
We
be
determine, our ordinances
They'll be
would
able to
determine what we
and
charge per
recoup
call.
some of that.
Correct.
Okay.
So, and then in that whole package that we pay for to Metro, they do the ambulance billing and the collection services, so we don't have to hire staff to do that as well.
Yeah.
They provide the ambulances, the paramedics, handle all the, you know, transpondence with the patients and all that. So they set that number on what the estimated revenue would be on calls, just based on prior years. So that's what they're at risk for. If they collect above and over what they say they're at risk for, that's what we get back.
So if we did it in-house, who would do our billing, our finance department? Or do we need to hire people for that too?
We'd have to address that at that time. It would be additional, I would be assuming, with the amount of work that they have, you know, but, you know, whether it's one person or two, I wouldn't. There's a whole floor at Metro that handles it, but it's multiple departments, so, yeah.
I just don't know what I don't know.
So, but that's a good point. There are a lot of unknowns, but there are known unknowns. So we know there's a discrepancy between a union firefighter providing ALS in-house and contract paramedic, and we could multiply this by 21. And if we're estimating, what would this cost be? So let's say at least $22 million plus, you know, more than that. And then we also have the costs of the training. So we have 13 firefighters that are certified in ALS.
Correct.
And so for us to provide this fully in-house, those firefighters would have to be trained, and that's a one-year program.
Right.
So pay for their training, pay for others to cover those roles, cover those shifts. So, and also pay the ones that are in training for, you know, their service. It's not that they're not going to be on the clock. So there are those costs that are, you know, we're talking about the startups, but yes, we also have the cost for the vehicles themselves, ambulances, plus we've learned, you know, with our existing fire trucks, the upfront cost is expensive and the maintenance cost is expensive. It's specialized, and it's not easy to get serviced, and there are unique parts that, so the labor and the parts themselves are more expensive. But yes, so to actually provide this service, to do the billing, to do, you know, payroll or the reconciliation, you know, we would have to, I would think, contemplate additional staffing to manage that. So yeah, there are more costs here than really just a one-to-one comparison. You know, and I would like to acknowledge that when we go through our budget process every year, there are motions made and we end up discussing a $5,000 increase or an additional $10,000 and think, wait a minute, what does this mean? I cannot think of a larger potential increase that we've ever entertained in the city, other than stormwater, those long-term stormwater projects. But this is one where with stormwater, the understanding is eventually those will just need maintenance, those projects, where this is something where there are longer-term obligations that grow, and they grow more steeply than any other city costs. So, and as we went back and we saw the dollar bill, 66% of the city's, right here, city's costs are attributable to pension costs, so that would rise. Should we bring this in-house also? Just some thoughts. Yes.
Could I talk about a scenario? You talked about the, that we currently have 13 firefighters who are ALS certified now. You talked about a scenario where we were, where we would get all of our firefighters up to that ALS certification. We heard some suggestions that we wouldn't need to do that with all of them. We would just use the folks who have it. If I'm recalling the conversation from 4 years ago correctly, we still need to designate the level of service that our units provide. And we have to specify if they're going to be providing ALS or not be providing ALS. So I think even if we were just working with the 13 firefighters that currently have that ALS certification, there needs to be some type of guarantee that they will be staffed in order to cover the trucks that we've designated will have that level of care. And I remember that being a complicating issue as well, that obviously that contemplates everyone's scheduling. If you want a day off, you'd have to you wouldn't just be able to ask anybody, you'd really have to make sure that it was someone with your level of service. So we really would be kind of, becomes a small pool to provide that service if we were not to do the additional training. So I don't know if staff wants to add color to that, but I do remember, in addition to what we're discussing tonight of the Substitute Act and the implications for our current contract, another complication was really scheduling, even if we were just working with that already certified pool of firefighters.
And if I can add on to that, when we hear from staff that, is it correct to say that one way in which we could cover or ensure that those 13 firefighters are the ones that are on shift would be to, look to overtime for them to provide that service? And then secondly, this is really for City Attorney Durkin. Once, even if we are told, well, only these firefighters, existing firefighters, will provide ALS, and you know what, we're going to agree to that. Eventually, that agreement runs out, and we can't bank on that always. Oh, we're only going to have this number of firefighters providing this service. That becomes subject to bargaining, and it's something that can change. And the known there is that it is unknown how that will change.
That's correct. You can't agree to a contract that lasts in perpetuity, so those things are subject to bargaining. I've been doing this for 42 years. I'm old enough to remember the days when I was a much younger attorney that the biggest fight was who gets overtime. And everybody wanted the overtime. They wanted the money. The senior person got first pick every time. And over the years, that's evolved. I've seen evolution to where time off is more of a premium than actual overtime. But with this same topic, I've seen where everybody wanted to be a paramedic in the beginning to then the more senior staff don't want to perform those functions in some departments. I'm not saying it would happen here in Elmhurst, but I've had to bargain issues over whether we could mandate everybody to do that work or whether people could opt out and under what terms could they opt out being a paramedic, and a lot of it was seniority driven. So things don't last forever. What you assume is the norm can change over time. So the fact that only 13 people will be performing it in 6 or 7 years, that may not be the case anymore.
Thank you. So, staff.
No.
So about the how would that be provided if we have?
The schedule, I just confirming the schedule, that scheduling was a concern when this came up 4 years ago.
Your recollection is correct, Alderman Deuter, with 13, and they're in various stages in their career, some pensionable. There's no guarantee that it would be a turnkey operation, because if we had just one at each station, we would need 2 medics a day. If we had 2 of the fire apparatus, staffed by medics, we would need 4 a day. We only have 13, so the odds of not having sufficient medics on a daily basis with a 3-platoon rotation is quite high. We'd get into a scheduling issue, mandatory minimum for medics. Then we get into overtime issues, we get into scheduling, we get back into, as the attorney stated before, subjects of bargaining, because we need X number of medics. If some of the people that retire, 13 could become 12 or 11. Granted, others may come on board. It won't happen tomorrow, and then we have to stipulate how many do we require, how many have to go to school. If you have to go to school and you aren't successful in school, did that become a stipulation of the job now? There's so many variables, but your recollection is correct. To have 13 right now wouldn't even permit us to start it tomorrow without agreeing to some rotation or scheduling to guarantee that those are on there. And if we only have one piece of apparatus at each station, we have 2 pieces of apparatus that go out the door to assist on ambulance calls. Which one gets it, which one doesn't, and which one arrives at your house, the one with or the one without. So, those are all the variables that all have to be agreed upon as a function of putting paramedics on the fire companies.
Thank you. No questions.
I'm done.
City Manager, do you have any recommendations? Now, I realize it is not typical for a committee to want to give an update at council before we have a report that we're recommending council action. In fact, I don't know if it's ever happened that I've known of. However, I think it'd be a good idea if we summarize what we've discussed tonight at the council level, yet our referral is still live. We're still reviewing this, and we're especially would like to further explore some of the points that we learned about today from Deputy Chief. Some of the, as we went through our presentation, there were some trends, there were some outliers that perhaps could use some more attention. But City Manager, do you have any thoughts, recommendations on the possibility of moving ALS in-house to be provided by our firefighters, or to maintain our existing structure?
So hearing everything that Attorney Durkin had to offer today on the potential change that could happen, the challenges, the consistency of the labor board, it would be my recommendation to continue the paramedic service the way we have it right now. As you were talking about earlier, the structure of our contract with Metro and Superior is unique in that they do our billing, they process all of that. We do pay an estimated fee annually that is offset by the billing, and as Alderman Park pointed out, we then get a refund at the end of the year, if you will, a refund or money that goes into our operating costs for that. So I cannot recommend to the council that we make a change at this point to do that, just with the potential that's out there with the labor board.
Okay. Thank you. Well, one takeaway, I think, for me from tonight is that it's possible to express gratitude for our firefighters and our contract paramedics both, and to be proud of the services that we provide, and to have admiration for their dedication and their high level of service. And I think, it's incredible that we have the services that we have, but that they are recognized by outside groups, both fire and EMS, provided by our contract paramedics. At the same time, I recognize the dire consequences that could result from the expansion of new pensionable roles. And I want to thank staff and City Attorney Durkin for walking us through, where we stand and also some of the potential questions and potential liabilities and costs that could be attached to a change in how we provide our services. So, thank you. Yes, sure. Oh, yeah, Mayor Morley, been quiet. I thought we'd hear from you. Are you on speaker? Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Are you getting any feedback?
Nope.
Okay, well, I'm getting a little. I'm kind of in the mountains in the middle of nowhere.
Okay.
So I'm going to speak slowly so I can try to concentrate. Okay, so I want to reiterate what Alderman Polonsky just said, which is thanking staff and City Attorney Durkin for their vast amount of information that they've put together. And I know that the committee is not finished with this referral, and I think it's a very important topic, and I think that they are providing a lot of very good data to the residents of Elmhurst. As it relates to the ALS conversation, a couple of things that I want to add to the conversation. First of all, I personally believe that our residents are getting exceptional service and the service that they pay for and the service that they deserve. I know that we've been working with Metro and Superior for 34 years, and I resent the implication that the residents are receiving anything less than the best service. I think we all have families in this town, parents, spouses, kids, and to think that elected officials and or staff would provide anything less to the residents of Elmhurst that they would expect to be provided to families, I think is ludicrous. So I think we are getting the best service. I'm glad that we're going through this exercise. It doesn't mean that we can't get better like we did with rapid response people. So I appreciate the exercise, but I want rest assured the residents to know that we're doing the best we can to provide them with the best service. I also think it's disingenuous for people to say that changing how we provide ALS, specifically if we shift that responsibility over to our firefighters, would not have a cost implication. Now, that's simply wrong. That's true. Both city staff and our attorneys have spent the last hour explaining how that would happen. As elected officials, especially during election time, we're always asked more with less. And that is exactly what's happening with our contract with Metro and how we provide ALS services to the residents of Elmhurst. Now, Alderman Plumsky, you were just saying how much we value our fire department. And I couldn't reiterate that more. But determining how we provide these services to the residents of Elmhurst is something that we all do, and I think we're doing what's correct. Some folks will say, well, there's a lot of other towns around that don't do this. They do it in a different way. Well, I think the conclusion, if you look at what was discussed tonight, is that we're fortunate that we're able to deliver ALS in this manner because of the budget implications. I serve on DMMC with City Manager Grabowski, and I know that all of the municipalities in DuPage County are facing severe budget implications due to COVID and general rising costs. And I think for the city of Elmhurst to consider adding millions of dollars to their operational budget on a yearly basis is not something that is prudent at this time. So I look forward to continued conversation and discussion from this committee as we continue to evaluate the needs of the residents and the best way for us to provide service to them. I really appreciate the hard work. I would reiterate what City Attorney Durkin said. We currently don't have bargaining as it relates to ALS. The two certainties he stated. And the other is we will have bargaining of ALS if how it's provided shifts. Thank you, Chairman Plum and the committee for your time. And I'm wrapped up again.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay. Any last comments, questions? Okay. So, City Manager, I'd like to ask that we have that listed on our next agenda, not in a place that has a vote, but just an update, please. That's all right with the committee?
Just clarify what the request would be or what the hope would be?
What I'm hoping is that we could do an interim report, and what I'm thinking is, instead of where our committee reports are, those are always actionable items, but if we could just do it without even putting it on the agenda, because the way it has reports from city council or from mayor and elected officials and city manager, we could just say it there, but I would like to have something listed, so if any member of the public is looking at our agenda, they'll know that underneath those reports, underneath those updates, we'll have something that says PA&S update on emergency response services.
And this is something that...
Not something that we're writing, not something that we're producing or that we're asking for a vote, but just an opportunity so the public knows that if they're not following along right here, they can look at the city council agenda. We'll touch on some points that we reviewed tonight.
How do we get to talk about that after tonight and before?
So when there's an active referral at committee, we're not going to contemplate changes at the city council. This is more like an update. So when city manager, near the end of a meeting, or if somebody makes an announcement, like beyond announcements, just to give an update, here's what's going on with ONCC, like Fly Quiet program, or something where there is a pending agenda item somewhere else, but we're getting an update. So basically to inform the council and any members of the public who are unable to join us tonight or not following this, just an update of what we've learned. And, I don't even think we'll have anything formal, but the only reason why I'm saying this now is I'd like to ask that we see that on the agenda for anybody following, to know that, if I tune into city council tonight, or if I come visit, I'm going to hear a little bit about what this committee's doing.
Yeah.
We're not voting on anything, but yeah.
No. My question was, will you just write that up, or do we all get to work together?
It doesn't even need to be written up. It's just like a delivered as we're seated up.
Just like
dais.
what Bob does for the ONCC? Yeah. Okay.
And that's something city manager would deliver, or you would deliver?
We both could. We could, and if you want to jump into and join.
I'd love to see it in writing, quite honestly. Like, just only because this is such an important topic, that if it could be something that's in writing and could be posted and referenced.
How about this? Can we post this existing presentation, but have it listed under reports, or
Sure.
that
Under
section of
elected
the
officials
agenda?
updates?
Yep.
We can do that.
Yep.
Alderman Polowski?
Yes, Mayor.
So we've done, as you've been explaining, we've done something like this in the past, especially on big topics that are faced a certain committee. It's really a fantastic way to bring up to speed all other council members who aren't on that committee.
Yes.
In terms of how you present it, I would ultimately leave it to the chairman of the committee to work with staff.
Yep.
Since you're going to be leading it, for you to disseminate the current status of what we're talking about to the rest of council.
Okay. If that's all right, I'll deliver it as an update. We're not voting. We are just, essentially, while people can follow this, we have other aldermen that are all on other assigned committees. We have seen some finish up and show up here tonight, but I think this is really an important topic for them to get an update on, and because they're they're actively participating in their own assigned committees, they don't know what we're discussing here.
Yeah.
So it's more of an update to say what we discussed tonight.
Yeah.
So just an update, but not necessarily opening a discussion.
No.
I mean, I would, I don't want the work that we're trying to accomplish here to
Nope.
happen among 14 people on the dais, but I can appreciate the importance of providing an update.
No, and because it is an active agenda item at this committee, it will remain one. So that means that it hasn't moved to the level where it is up for debate and discussion at the council level.
Got it. So it's-
Yeah, and I would like to see, I mean, this is great, but there's just so much. Like, if we could craft a summary of like what we've learned or something as part of the update.
Okay,
have it be
sure,
there.
I'll work with staff just to summarize what we have here. Essentially, what I'm saying here, what I'm asking city managers to make sure, instead of me just bringing this up, which we are permitted to do underneath reports of elected officials and city manager, we could have done that. I just want to make sure the public knows that this is here, just because I think this is of such high interest, want to make sure that it is listed, that's
Yeah.
all. So this is something that doesn't need a committee action for me to give an update, or any member really to give an update on, but just because I know that people are following this agenda item, and I want to make sure it's clear, people know where to find it. If you're searching an agenda, you know what, this meeting looks like it's over, but listen, at the end, when we're getting some updates, it looks like there's going to be this topic addressed, so people know that it's there. Okay?
Yep.
All right, thank you. Thanks, okay. Moving on to other business. Any other business? All I want to say, I want to remind my fellow committee members to check back in with staff so we can sign off, like what happened with like the clerk after a full council meeting, because we're not sitting around a conference table, individually sign off on the reports that we approved tonight. So, thank you. All right, no other business? All right, can we have a motion to adjourn? Motion, Alderman Parks, second, Alderman Deuter. Director Olberg, can you please take the roll?
Yes. Chairman Plumsky.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Deuter.
Aye.
Alderman Park.
Aye.
Okay, all in favor, none opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it. And also, I want to thank staff for moving this meeting here so more people could participate, and then because of that move, it just happened to be that we could record it, so thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.